Hello and welcome back. Tonight is one of those warm, watery, steam-softened nights that seem made for being cared for letting yourself be tended and unhurried after a long stretch of doing and hurrying and holding yourself upright in the world. If you are someone who loves the deep pleasure of hot water at the end of a tiring day, the ritual of a long soak, the feeling of clean skin and eased shoulders, and a body finally allowed to go soft, then I think you have found exactly the right evening to spend here with me. Because tonight, I would like to take you back across 2,000 years into the lamplit heart of a great Roman bathhouse, and let you drift through its steaming halls while the pools murmur and the marble holds the day's heat, and the enormous building breathes gently around you. You do not need to do anything at all now, except let that warmth begin to reach you, and let your shoulders come down a little from around your ears, and let your breathing lengthen and settle. Somewhere ahead of us tonight, in a quiet lamplit corner of this place, a great lady of Rome is keeping a secret worth an emperor's fortune, a way of keeping her skin as soft and pale as a young girl's that required a gentle herd of animals to follow her wherever in the world she went. And before our evening together is over, you and I are going to stand quietly at the edge of her private ritual and see exactly how it was done. Before we step in through those tall marble doors, I want to say one simple word to you, the way an old friend might say it across the steam of a shared bath. If these long, slow, faraway evenings are something you would like to be able to find your way back to on the nights when sleep will not come easily, then you are always welcome to subscribe, and simply to stay a while whenever the day has worn you down and you need somewhere gentle to rest your mind. I love knowing who is here in the dark with me tonight, the town whose lights are glowing outside your window, the hour the clock has quietly reached in the room where you are lying, whether the rain is running down the glass or the house has gone still and quiet around you at last. You are always welcome to leave any of that down in the comments below whenever you feel like it, and I do look through them far more often than you would ever guess. And I carry your names and your scattered faraway cities with me from one evening into the next. That is the only small and ordinary thing I will ask of you tonight. Everything else that waits for us is soft and unhurried and kind, and asks nothing of you at all. Imagine this. It is the golden, cooling end of a long Roman afternoon, sliding slowly down into evening, and you are standing in a wide paved street in the greatest city in the world, with the day's heat still rising up gently from the stones beneath your feet. The light has gone the colour of honey. Long, soft shadows lean across the road, and all around you, moving in the same unhurried direction, are people of every kind the city holds, drifting toward one enormous and beautiful building whose roofs and domes rise up ahead against the deepening sky. From somewhere within it, a great bronze bell has just been struck, one long golden note rolling out across the rooftops, and everyone who hears it smiles a little and quickens their step, because that sound means the thing they have been waiting for all day. It means the water is hot. It means the baths are open. Come with me. Let us join the gentle crowd drifting toward those doors, and let me take you inside the watery world where all of Rome came, every single evening, to be soothed. Let us not hurry through these last streets, because the walk there was part of the pleasure, and I want you to feel the city softening around us as we go. The great heat of the Roman day is finally loosening its grip. All afternoon, the sun has hammered down on this city of pale stone and red roof tiles, and now, at last, it is sliding low and gold behind the hills, and a cool breath is beginning to move through the streets, and the exhausted city is exhaling. Shopkeepers are folding away their awnings. A water seller pushes his cart home, the last of his jars sloshing gently. Somewhere above us, a woman calls down from a high window to a child in the street below, and the child, reluctant, comes. This was the hour when the working day ended, and the best hour of it began, the hour when a citizen turned, with real longing, toward the baths. Feel the ground beneath your feet as we walk. The street is paved with blocks of worn stone, fitted close, their surfaces polished smooth and faintly slick by the passage of countless feet and cartwheels over the years. And they have soaked up the day's warmth and give it back now through the soles of your sandals. Down the centre of the road runs a shallow channel where water trickles, carrying away the dust of the day, and the sound of it follows us along, a thin, constant thread of running water that you will come to know very well tonight. Because in this city, it is everywhere. It runs in the streets, gushes from fountains at every crossroads. It pours day and night, without ever stopping, into the halls ahead of us. More of it than you could imagine, brought from the distant hills by one of the wonders of this civilization, and we shall follow it all the way back to its source before the night is done. The crowd around us thickens as we near the building, and I want you to look at who they are, because it will tell you something important about the place we are going. Here is a wealthy man in a fine woolen toga, walking unhurried, followed by a little train of enslaved attendants, carrying his towels and his oils and his fresh clothes. But here, walking beside him without the least awkwardness, is a common labourer with the dust of a building site still on his arms, and a shopkeeper, and a soldier off duty, and an old man leaning on a stick, and a group of young men laughing and shoving one another, and women too, in their own groups, veiled and unveiled, hurrying and strolling. Rich and poor, high and low, the powerful and the powerless, all of them flowing together toward the same doors. For this place was, in a way that almost nothing else in this hard and hierarchical world ever was, a place for everyone. The price of entry was a single small coin, the very smallest coin there was, so small that almost anyone could find it. And for that tiny sum, a poor man could bathe in the same gleaming marble halls, in the same hot water, under the same painted ceilings as the richest senator in Rome. Think about how remarkable that is, and how much it tells you about what these people valued. This was a society built on the sharpest divisions imaginable, a world of masters and slaves, of citizens and outsiders, of the mighty and the crushed, where your rank showed in your clothes and your seat at the games and the very shape of your day. And yet, at the heart of every Roman town, given the finest architecture and the most lavish decoration the age could produce, stood this one great institution where, for the price of the smallest coin in your purse, the divisions loosened and everyone soaked together in the same hot water. It was not equality as we might dream of it. The enslaved still carried the towels. But it was something, a daily softening of the world's hard edges, a place where the pleasure of hot bathing and clean skin was held to be the birthright of nearly everyone, and I find that oddly moving, and worth carrying in your mind as we finally reach the doors. For here it is now, rising up before us. The entrance is a great arched doorway, set in a facade of coloured marble, and above it, the building climbs in tiers of stone and brick toward domes and vaults that catch the last of the golden light. People are streaming in through the arch ahead of us, their voices rising into a warm blur of sound that spills out into the street. Laughter and greeting, and the general happy murmur of a crowd anticipating pleasure. And carried out on that gust of noise comes a smell, the particular smell of the baths, that would tell a blind Roman exactly where he stood. Wood smoke and wet stone, and olive oil, and beneath it all a rich tangle of perfumes, roses and saffron, and something sweet and resinous, the scent of 1,000 oiled and anointed bodies. Breathe it in. That damp, perfumed, smoky air is the smell of leisure itself, the smell of the best hours of the Roman day, and it is drifting out to meet us now as we step in beneath the arch, out of the cooling street and into the warm gold light within. We are through the arch now and into a vast entrance hall, and the first thing to do is simply stop and stand and let the sheer scale of it settle over you. They built these places to overwhelm, and they succeeded. The ceiling soars far above our heads, so high that the lamplight barely reaches it, and the upper air is lost in a golden haze. Enormous columns of polished coloured stone, green and purple, and honey gold, march away down the hall, each one cut from a single mighty block and carried here across the sea from quarries at the far edges of the empire. The floors beneath us are laid in intricate mosaic, tiny coloured tiles fitted together into pictures of sea creatures and gods and twining vines, cool and smooth and gleaming underfoot. And everywhere, in niches along the walls, stand statues of gleaming marble, gods and heroes and emperors, their calm, carved faces watching the endless human tide flow past below them. This is not what you expected a bathhouse to look like, and that is exactly the point. They did not build these places merely to get clean. They built them as palaces of pleasure open to all the people, temples to the good life, and they poured into them the same wealth and artistry and engineering genius that other ages have poured into cathedrals and royal courts. A citizen stepping in from the mud and noise of the street, a man who lived most likely in a cramped and dingy few rooms up several flights of dark stairs, stepped here into a world of marble and colour and soaring space that must have felt, every single evening, like walking into the house of a god. And it was his, for the smallest coin in his purse. That was the gift of it. For a few hours, the poorest man in Rome could live like the richest. Just inside the entrance, there is a small commotion of paying and greeting. And let us watch it a moment. An attendant sits by the door, taking the entrance coins, that tiny bronze piece, dropping them into a box with a soft, continuous clink. People are greeting the doorkeeper by name, calling out to friends they have spotted across the hall, arranging to meet later in one room or another. The wealthy are peeling off toward their private attendants. And everyone, rich and poor alike, is beginning that lovely slow transformation that the place worked on a person, the shedding of the outside world, the letting go of the day. You can almost see it happen on their faces as they come through the arch, the loosening, the softening, the quiet relief of arrival. There is a particular kind of person moving through this crowd that I want you to notice, because he was essential to the machinery of the place. He is an attendant, one of the many enslaved workers without whom the place could not have run for a single hour, and he is carrying a bundle of a wealthy patron's belongings, folded clothes and clean towels, and a little case of oils and bronze scrapers. His task, once his master is inside, will be to guard these things faithfully in the changing room, for a bathhouse, like every crowded spot where people take off their valuables, was a paradise for thieves, and a moment's inattention could see a fine toga vanish forever. It is worth remembering, amid all this marble and pleasure, that every bit of the ease enjoyed here rested on the unremarked labour of many people who did not share in it, who stoked the fires and guarded the clothes, and scrubbed the floors and carried the towels, and whose names are entirely lost. The Roman at his ease in the pool did not think about them. Let us think about them, just for a moment, as we pass, and then move on, deeper into the building, toward the place where the ritual truly begins. Ahead of us, the entrance hall narrows toward a doorway, and through it, the light changes, growing warmer and more intimate, and the sounds change too, the great echoing roar of the hall giving way to something closer and more human. Voices and laughter and the rustle of cloth. That doorway leads to the changing room, the first true station of the ritual, the threshold where a person stepped out of their clothes and their public self and became, simply, a body among other bodies, ready to be soothed. Come, let us go through. The changing room is a long, high, handsome chamber, and it has a warmth and a closeness to it, after the great cold echoing entrance hall, a sense of people gathered comfortably together. Along every wall, from about waist height up to well above your head, the stone is divided into rows of open niches, each one a small arched recess, just large enough to hold a folded set of clothes. And above or beside many of them, a small carved number or a little painted symbol, a boar, a bird, a wheat sheaf, so that a bather could remember which niche held his belongings. They called this room by a name that meant simply the undressing place. And that is exactly what happened here. This is where you shed the outside world. Around us, people are undressing without the least self-consciousness, folding their tunics and togas and laying them in the niches, handing them to attendants, settling onto the long stone benches that run beneath the recesses to unlace their sandals. There is nothing furtive or awkward about it. And that is a thing worth pausing on, because it was so different from how many of us have been taught to feel about our bodies. To them, the unclothed body here was simply ordinary, unremarkable, neither shameful nor thrilling, just the natural state of a person about to bathe. Fat bodies and thin ones, young and old, scarred and smooth, the bodies of labourers and the bodies of senators, all of them here together in the lamplight, entirely unbothered. There is something clean and healthy in that ease, that absence of shame, and it settles over the room, like the warmth itself. The wealthy, of course, did this in more comfort than the poor, as the wealthy do everything. A rich woman arriving here would have her own enslaved attendants to help her undress and to guard her fine clothes and jewels, and to carry, ready for later, the little box that held her most precious things. Her oils and her perfumes, and the tools of her beauty. A poor woman would fold her own single tunic, lay it in a niche, and simply trust to luck and to the bath thief's laziness that it would still be there when she returned. But once the clothes were off, once everyone stood equal in their own bare skin, a good deal of that difference fell away, at least for a while. The senator and the labourer, undressed, were only two tired human bodies in need of hot water. The place had a way of reducing everyone, gently, to that. Let the sounds of the changing room settle around you. There is the soft slap of bare feet on the heated floor, and the low murmur of 100 easy conversations, and somewhere the clink of a bracelet being unclasped, and the rustle and fold of cloth, and a burst of laughter from a knot of friends in the corner. Under it all, there is a deep, contented, anticipatory hum, the sound of people who have finished their work and are about to be pleasured, who have nowhere else to be and nothing else to do but surrender, for the next few hours, to hot water and easy company and the ceremony of being cleaned and soothed. It is one of the most peaceful sounds in the world, the sound of people at their leisure, and it fills this high room from end to end. And now, unclothed, wrapped perhaps in a light linen cloth or simply bare, a pair of wooden-soled sandals on your feet, to protect them from what is coming, you are ready to begin. There are two directions a bather might go from here. Some went first to sweat and steam and be scraped clean, but many, especially in the grandest houses, went first the other way, out into the open air of the great courtyard, to move their bodies and warm their blood before the water ever touched them. That is the way I want to take you first, because it will show you a side of these places you might not expect, and because the light out there, at this hour, is very beautiful. Come, let us step out into the courtyard, into the last of the evening sun. Out through a wide doorway on the far side of the changing room, and all at once the ceiling vanishes, and the sky opens above us, and we are standing at the edge of an open courtyard, roofless and vast, ringed on all four sides by a shaded colonnade of tall columns. This is the exercise yard, the palestra, and it is one of the beating hearts of this place, for they believed, sensibly, that the body should be warmed and worked before it was bathed, that a little sweat honestly earned made the hot rooms and the massage that followed all the sweeter. The last of the golden evening light is slanting low across the open space, now, catching the tops of the columns and throwing long soft shadows across the sand, and the air out here is cooler and fresher after the warmth within. And smells of dust and sweat, and the green of the plants in the colonnade. The courtyard is alive with movement, and it is a wonderful thing to watch. Here a group of men are throwing and catching a small hard ball in a fast, laughing circle, their bodies quick and intent in the low light. There a pair are wrestling on the sand, gripping and heaving and grunting, circled by a knot of friends shouting cheerful and unhelpful advice. An older man is going slowly through a set of gentle stretches on his own, in no hurry, warming his stiff joints. Someone is swinging a pair of stone weights, up and down, his breath coming hard. A few are simply strolling the shaded edges of the colonnade in twos and threes, talking, their hands moving as they argue some point, keeping to the cool shadow. Every kind of exercise the age knew was happening here at once, from the fiercely athletic to the barely moving, each person finding their own level, working up the pleasant warmth that would carry them into the water. The women, in the parts of the day or the wings of the building set aside for them, had their own gentler version of this, their own ball games and light exercise, their own strolling and stretching in the cool of the colonnade. And for everyone, before the real exertion began, there was a first small ritual that I especially want you to see, because it is the beginning of the great skincare secret of this world. The thing that lay at the very centre of how these people cleaned and cared for their skin. Before exercising, a bather was oiled. An attendant would take a flask of fine olive oil and pour it into his cupped hands, and he would work it over his body, his arms and shoulders and chest and legs, until his skin gleamed and the oil had sunk in and softened it. The wealthy had their oil poured and rubbed on for them by their attendants. And this was not, as you might think, only to make the exercise smoother. It was the first step of a way of caring for the skin that was completely unlike anything you know, and once you understand it, you will never quite think about your own washing the same way again. For here is the thing that startles almost everyone when they first learn it. These people, for all their obsession with cleanliness, for all these vast and glorious bathing palaces, did not really use soap. They had no bar of soap to lather up, no foaming wash, as we would know it. Instead, their entire method of getting clean turned on oil. They oiled the body deliberately, all over, and that oil, as the bather exercised and sweated and moved through the heated rooms, mixed with the sweat and the dust and the dead, tired outer layer of the skin, and gathered it all up, and held it, so that all of it could then be scraped away together in one clean sweep, leaving the skin beneath fresh and soft and glowing. Oil to lift the dirt, and then a blade to take the oil away. It sounds strange. Put like that, almost backward, and yet it worked beautifully, and it left the skin in a condition that a good deal of harsh modern washing never achieves. And the blade that did the scraping, that curved and gleaming little tool, is the thing I want to put into your hands next. Come out of the sun with me, back into the warmth, and let me show you the strigil. Let us step back in from the courtyard into a smaller chamber off the main sequence, an anointing room where the oiling and the scraping were done properly and at leisure, and where the tools of it are laid ready. There is a low couch here, and beside it a small table, and on the table the beautiful simple instruments of the ritual, the things that every bather in the empire knew as intimately as you know your own toothbrush. There is the oil flask first, a small round vessel of pottery or bronze, its neck narrow, so the precious oil would come out slowly, drop by drop, often shaped like a little round belly, and hung on a ring so it could dangle from the wrist or a peg. And hanging on the same ring, or laid beside it, are the scrapers themselves, the strigils, and these are the true secret of their cleanliness. So let me put one in your hand. Take it up in your mind and feel its weight. A strigil is a curved blade of bronze, not sharp like a knife, but smooth and blunt along its scraping edge, shaped in a long, shallow curve like a bent finger or a crescent moon, with a handle at one end sized to fit neatly into a closed fist. The curve is the clever part. It is shaped exactly to follow the contours of a human limb, to fit the round of an arm, the length of a shin, the broad plane of a back, so that when it is drawn firmly across oiled skin, it glides along the flesh and lifts in one smooth stroke, a little rolling wave of oil and sweat and loosened dirt, gathering it at the blade's edge to be flicked away. The bather, or more often his attendant, would work over the body this way, stroke after patient stroke, down each arm, along each leg, across the chest and the back, and with each pass the skin came up cleaner and pinker and softer until the body had been scraped fresh and new. Think about what this ritual was really, beneath the strangeness of it. It was a deep and thorough exfoliation, the gentle removal of all the dead and dulling outer skin, done not once in a while but daily, as a matter of ordinary routine, by nearly everyone in the society. We spend fortunes now and invent endless creams and scrubs and treatments to achieve exactly what a Roman achieved every evening with a flask of olive oil and a curved piece of bronze. The skin, scraped this way, day after day, would have been remarkably smooth and clear and soft, the dead surface constantly lifted away, the fresh living skin beneath constantly brought to the light, and the oil that remained, worked into that freshly scraped surface, left it supple and protected and faintly scented. It was, when you look at it clearly, one of the great skincare routines of all history, hiding in plain sight, practiced by an entire civilization, and requiring nothing but oil, warmth, and a patient blade. There is a famous image from the ancient world, a statue that survives, of a young athlete caught in exactly this moment, standing with one arm extended and the other drawing the strigil down along it, his head bent a little, his whole attention on the small, careful task of scraping himself clean. It is a quiet, human, unheroic pose, and they loved it and copied it many times, because it caught something they all knew in their bodies: the small daily pleasure of that ritual, the particular satisfaction of drawing the blade along the skin and seeing it come up clean. To be scraped was to be renewed. It was one of the ordinary tendernesses these people showed their own tired bodies, and it happened every evening in rooms exactly like this one, all across an empire that stretched from the cold rivers of the north to the deserts of the south. Now the oil is worked into your skin, and you are ready for the heat, for it is the heat that opens everything. That starts the sweat flowing, and the pores widening, and readies the body to be scraped and soothed. Beyond this little anointing room, the true sequence begins, the famous procession of rooms, each one warmer than the last, that a Roman moved through like the movements of a piece of music, from gentle warmth to fierce heat, and back again to a bracing chill. Let us step into the first of them now, the warm room, where the body begins, slowly and pleasantly, to let go. Come this way, and mind the floor, for it grows warmer beneath your feet with every step. The warm room, which the Romans called the tepidarium, is perhaps the loveliest room in the sequence, and it is the one where I most want you to linger, because it was designed for exactly the kind of gentle, drifting ease that you are settling into now. It is a beautiful vaulted chamber, not large, its ceiling curving overhead in a smooth arc, decorated with painted stucco and gilding that glows softly in the light of the lamps. The walls are lined with coloured marble, and stone benches run along them, and here and there people are sitting or half reclining at their ease, doing nothing at all, letting the mild and even warmth of the room soak slowly into their bodies. There is no pool here, no plunging or splashing. This room is not about water. It is about warmth and the delicious surrender to it. Feel the heat of this place. It is not the fierce assault of the hot room that waits beyond, but a gentle, enveloping, all-over warmth, the temperature of a perfect summer afternoon, coming up softly through the floor beneath your feet and radiating out from the very walls themselves. This was the room where the body made its transition from the cool outer world to the intense heat ahead, where a person sat and let their muscles begin to loosen, and their skin begin to glow, and their breathing begin to deepen, in no hurry at all. To rush this room was to miss its purpose. The pleasure of the tepidarium was the pleasure of anticipation, gently prolonged, of sitting in perfect mild warmth, and knowing that there was nowhere to be and nothing to do, and all the evening still ahead. And the warmth itself, The miraculous even warmth of this room came from beneath, from a piece of engineering so clever and so completely hidden that a bather sitting here in blissful comfort would rarely have given it a moment's thought. The floor you are resting your feet upon is not lying on solid ground. It is raised up, held aloft on a forest of small brick pillars, so that beneath it there runs a hidden hollow space, and through that space, all evening and all night, flows hot air and smoke from great furnaces, stoked ceaselessly somewhere out of sight. The heat rises through the floor, and it rises too through hollow tiles built into the walls, so that the room, floor, and walls together becomes a gentle radiating source of warmth, even and clean and smokeless. We will go down, later, into the hidden underworld where that heat is made, and meet the people who make it, for it is one of the true marvels of this place. But for now, simply rest in the result of their labour, the perfect mild warmth that surrounds you. There is a particular quality to the sound in this room too, that adds to its peace. The vaulted ceiling gathers and softens every noise, so that the voices of the people resting here come to you rounded and blurred and gentle, a low continuous murmur with no sharp edges. Rising and falling like easy breathing, someone is talking quietly to a friend on the next bench. Somewhere a bather sighs with contentment as the warmth reaches a knot of tiredness in his shoulders and slowly unpicks it. The soft pad of feet, the distant echo of water from the rooms beyond, all of it woven together into a sound as soothing as the warmth itself. This is a room built entirely for the letting go of tension, and it does its work on everyone who enters, whether they notice or not. Let yourself be one of them now. Settle onto a marble bench in your mind and lean your head back against the smooth stone. And feel the heat come up through the floor and radiate from the walls and wrap itself gently around your body. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel your jaw unclench. Let the long day begin, at last, to loosen its hold on you and drain slowly away through the heated floor beneath you. There is no hurry now. There is nothing to do. And when you are ready, when the warmth has done its gentle work and your body is loose and glowing and prepared, we will step through into the next room where the heat grows fierce and the steam begins to rise. And the real sweating begins. But not yet. Rest here a while longer first. The heat is patient. So are we. When we finally rise and step through into the next chamber, the change strikes the body at once, and a small gasp is the natural response, though a pleasant one. This is the hot room, the caldarium, and after the mild ease of the warm room, it hits you like walking into a wall of soft heat. The air here is thick and hot and heavy with moisture, almost liquid to breathe. And within moments of stepping in, a fine sheen of sweat has broken out across your skin. The room swims with steam. The lamps burn with soft halos around them in the thickened air. And the heat presses in from every side, from the scorching floor beneath your wooden soles, from the hot walls, from the very air itself, wrapping the body in a fierce enveloping warmth that opens every pore and starts the sweat running freely. This was the fiercest and most intense room of the sequence, the climax of it. And it took a moment's courage to enter and a certain hardiness to endure. At one end of the chamber steams a pool of genuinely hot water, hot as a very hot bath, and bathers lower themselves into it slowly, with sighs and gasps, to soak in the deep heat until their bodies glow scarlet. The room was built to hold and multiply heat. Often it faced the setting sun, with great windows to catch the last warmth of the day and add it to the fires, and its floors and walls were the hottest in the building, sitting almost directly above the hidden furnaces. To stand here was to sweat as you have rarely sweated, to feel the body pouring out the day's tiredness and staleness in rivers, to be cooked gently and thoroughly clean from the inside out. But the hot room held a small mercy, a lovely detail that I want you to see, because it speaks of how well these people understood the pleasures and needs of the body. Set into the room, usually against the wall, away from the hot pool, stood a large shallow basin of stone raised on a pedestal. And this basin was filled not with hot water, but with cool. It was there for the face. For in all that fierce heat, with the sweat streaming and the head beginning to swim, the one thing a bather longed for was to splash cool water on the face, to press wet, cool hands against hot cheeks and closed eyes and a burning brow. And this basin stood ready for exactly that. A small oasis in the heart of the heat. Picture it. A bather, scarlet and streaming, stepping to the basin, cupping that chill water in both hands, and pressing it to the face with a long sigh of relief. Again and again, the wet trickling down through the heat. It is such a human thing. Such a small and perfect kindness built right into the architecture, and it tells you how deeply these people had thought about the simple comfort of the body. There was a purpose to all this sweating beyond mere endurance. And it returns us to the great skincare secret we have been following all evening. Remember that the body was oiled before all this began. Now, in the fierce heat of this room, that oil, warmed and loosened, mingles thoroughly with the freely running sweat and with all the dust and grime and dead skin it has gathered. And the mixture is drawn up and out through the wide open pores and lies now on the surface of the skin, ready to be scraped away. The heat, in other words, was doing the deep work of the cleansing. It was drawing everything up to the surface, opening the skin, readying it. A bather would often be scraped down with the strigil here, or just after, in the full flush of the heat, the blade lifting away the warmed oil and everything caught in it, leaving the skin beneath scoured clean and open and glowing. This was the deep cleanse at the heart of it all, and the heat of this room was its engine. Now, glowing and streaming and scraped clean, you have reached the turning point of the evening, the peak of the heat, and from here the journey turns and begins its delicious descent back toward coolness. But before we follow it down, I want to take you somewhere most bathers never went, somewhere hidden beneath our very feet, where the heat that fills this enormous building is made, hour after hour by human hands. Come with me, down a narrow stair, into the underworld of the baths, and let me show you the fire, down a small doorway in a corner, down a narrow flight of worn stone steps, and the beautiful world of marble and steam and murmuring ease falls away above us. And we descend into a wholly different place, the hidden underworld on which all of it rests. The air changes as we go down, growing hotter and drier and thick with wood smoke, and the smooth marble gives way to rough brick and bare stone, and the soft murmur of bathers is replaced by a deeper sound, the roar and crackle of great fires and the rhythmic scrape and thud of hard labour. This is the underfloor world, the service level of the baths, and it is as hot and hard and dark as the rooms above are cool and easy and bright. Here is where the magic of all that warmth was actually made. And here is where a whole hidden population of enslaved workers spent their days feeding the fires that soothed the city. Let your eyes adjust to the flickering red gloom. We are in a low, cramped space beneath the floors of the great heated rooms, and now you can see the secret of the heating system laid bare. The floor of the hot rooms above us, which the bathers rest their feet upon, is held up on countless small pillars of stacked brick, rank upon rank of them marching away into the smoky dark like the pillars of some buried temple. And between and around them flows the hot air and smoke from the furnaces, filling this hollow underfloor and heating the stone above from beneath. At the end of this space burns the furnace itself, a great arched mouth of fire, roaring and white hot, and the heat of it rolls over us in waves even from here. This was the engine of the entire building, and it never rested. All through the day and deep into the night, it had to be fed, and feeding it was the work of human beings, and I want you to see them clearly, because they are the people the splendid pleasure palace above was built upon, and they are almost always forgotten. Here, in this heat and smoke and roar, enslaved workers labour without pause, hauling great loads of wood and feeding it into the furnace mouth raking the coals, tending the fire so that the heat above never falters. Their bodies are slick with sweat and streaked with soot and ash. The heat they work in is far fiercer than anything the bathers upstairs endure for pleasure. And they endure it not for an hour of leisure, but for the length of a working day, every day, so that the marble rooms above may stay warm, and the pools may stay hot, and the people of Rome may be soothed. The bather, sighing with contentment in the room above, has almost certainly never seen this place, never thought about where the warmth beneath his feet comes from, never once pictured the fire and the labouring bodies just below him in the dark. It is worth sitting with that for a moment, because it is the shadow that lies beneath so much of the beauty of this world, and it would be a kind of lie to walk you through all this pleasure without it. These places were one of the most generous and civilized institutions the ancient world ever produced, a daily gift of comfort and cleanliness offered to nearly everyone. And they ran entirely on the unseen labour of people who were owned, who had no share in the ease they made possible, who sweated in the dark beneath the floors, so that others could sweat in comfort in the light above. Both things are true at once, the beauty and the cost, the pleasure and the hidden suffering that paid for it. And the honest thing is to hold them both. I will not dwell on it, for this is a gentle night, and I do not want to weigh your heart down as you drift towards sleep. But as we climb back up now, out of the heat and smoke, and into the murmuring marble world above, let us carry with us a moment's quiet thought for the people we are leaving behind in the dark. Tending the fire, up the narrow stair again, then and back into the bright halls above, where the steam curls softly, and the water murmurs, and the bathers drift from room to room in perfect ease. The heat has done its work on you. You are scraped clean and glowing and loose, and now the sequence turns and leads us onward, deeper into the sweating rooms, and then, at last, toward the shock and the glory of the cold. Come. There is a room ahead where the steam grows so thick you can scarcely see, and it is one of the strangest pleasures of the evening. The chamber we come to now is the strangest and most intense of all the sweating rooms. And stepping into it is like stepping into a white cloud. This is the sweat room, which they knew by more than one name depending on whether its heat was dry or wet, and the one we enter tonight is the steaming kind. The kind where water is thrown onto heated stones to fill the space with a dense, hot, blinding fog. You can barely see across it. The steam hangs so thick that the lamps are only soft glowing smudges in the whiteness, and the figures of other bathers loom and fade like ghosts. And the world contracts to the wet cloud immediately around you, and the sound of your own breathing, and the steady drip of gathered water falling from the ceiling. This was the deepest sweat of the bathing ritual. The room where a bather went to be truly and thoroughly steamed, to sit in the enveloping fog until every last impurity had been sweated out, and the body ran with water, and the mind emptied itself of every thought. There is a particular peace in a place like this, a peace born of the sheer overwhelming of the senses. You cannot see far, you cannot hear much beyond the drip and hiss of the steam. The heat is total and enveloping, and so the mind, with nothing to fix upon, simply lets go, and drifts, and the body sits and sweats and empties itself, and time loses its shape entirely. People spoke of the deep relaxation of these chambers, the way an hour could pass in the steam like a few minutes, the way a person emerged feeling wrung out and weightless and utterly cleansed, as though they had sweated away not just the grime of the body, but the cares of the mind. Let me tell you a little about how this remarkable heat was managed, because it was cleverer than it looks. The steam room sat close above the hottest part of the furnace system, where the underfloor heat was fiercest, and its walls were threaded through with the same hollow tiles that warmed the other rooms, so that the very surfaces of the space radiated a dry baking heat of their own. To turn that dry heat wet, to make the blinding fog, water was simply cast onto the scorching floor or onto heated stone, and it burst instantly into steam and filled the room. A skilled attendant could raise or soften the fog at will, and knew exactly how thick to make it, how much water to throw, to bring the bathers to that perfect state of streaming, melting, thoughtless ease. It was a small art in itself. The tending of the steam, and the men who practiced it knew the moods of their room as a gardener knows his soil. For the skin, this deep steaming was the final opening, the last and most complete widening of the pores, drawing out the last of the oil and grime and leaving the skin utterly clean and receptive. A bather who had sweated fully here and then been scraped clean had skin as open and fresh and ready as it would ever be, ready to receive the perfumed oils and the soothing unguents that came at the very end of the bath, ready to drink them in. The whole long procession of warm room and hot room and steam room was, in a sense, an elaborate preparation of the skin, a thorough opening and cleansing, so that when the good oils came at the last, they would sink in deep and do their softening work. These people understood the skin as few societies before or since have understood it, understood that it must be opened and cleansed before it could truly be fed, and they built an entire architecture, an entire daily ritual. Around that quiet understanding, there is a health in it too, beyond the beauty, that they felt keenly, even if they could not have explained it in our terms. To sweat deeply and often is to cleanse the body from within, to drive out the stale humours, as they would have said, to leave a person feeling lighter and clearer and renewed. Their physicians prescribed the sweating rooms for all manner of complaints, for the heaviness that comes of rich food and idle days, for aches and stiffness, for low and clouded spirits. And whatever the true mechanism, the effect was real. For a person who has sweated thoroughly and then rested does feel lighter, clearer, eased, and they chased that feeling and found it here in the white fog, day after day after day. Sit a while in the warm cloud, in your mind, and let it work upon you. Feel the steam settle on your skin in a fine dew. Let your breath go deep in the wet heat. Let the last of your tension dissolve, the way a lump of salt dissolves in hot water, until there is nothing left of the day at all. Only the blank peace of the fog and the soft distant drip of water, and the sense of your own body, cleansed and open and utterly at ease. This is as deep into the heat as we will go tonight. From here, everything turns toward coolness and refreshment, and the gentle journey back out toward the world. And the very next step is the most dramatic of the night, the one that made Romans gasp and laugh aloud. The great cold plunge. Come, let us step out of the steam, out of the thick, warm cloud of the steam room, and into a hall that could not be more different, and the change is glorious. This is the cold room, the frigidarium, and after all that heat it strikes the body like a plunge into a mountain stream, bracing and clean and shocking and wonderful. It is the grandest space of the sequence, often the largest and most beautiful in the entire building. A soaring vaulted hall with its ceiling far overhead and high windows, letting in the last cool blue light of the evening. And at its heart, wide and still and gleaming, lies a great pool of cold water, deep enough to swim in, its surface trembling faintly in the light, waiting after the fierce heat and the blinding steam. The very sight of it is a joy. The Romans came to this plunge at the end of their heat, and they entered it with drama, with gasps and shouts and bursts of laughter, because the shock of it, after all that heat, was tremendous and delicious. Picture a bather stepping to the edge, scarlet and steaming from the hot rooms, pausing a moment at the brink, and then plunging in, the chill closing over the scalded skin in an instant, the body coming alive at once with the shock of it, every nerve singing, the breath catching, and then the surfacing, the gasp, the laugh, the tremendous tingling aliveness of it all. This was the great wakening, the cold snap that closed the pores, the heat had opened, that firmed the softened skin, that sent the blood racing and left the body glowing and tingling and intensely, wonderfully awake. To go from the deep languor of the steam to the electric shock of the cold pool was to feel the full range of what a body could feel. all in the space of a few minutes. Feel it in your own body as you imagine it, even lying warm and still where you are. Remember the heat you have carried all through the hot rooms. And then imagine the icy water closing over your skin, the sharp, clean shock of it, the way it would make you gasp and then laugh, the way every inch of you would suddenly be awake and alive and tingling. And then there is the deep, settled well-being that comes after. When you climb out and the water sheets off your skin, and the air is mild and soft against you, and your body hums with a clean, earned, glowing contentment. There is nothing quite like the feeling of the body after heat and chill in succession, that deep physical satisfaction, that sense of having been thoroughly worked and cleansed and woken and soothed all at once. They chase that feeling every single day, and they built these glorious halls of chill water to give it to themselves. The doctors of Rome thought a good deal about this passage from heat to chill and argued about it, as doctors do. Some held that the plunge was the very crown of the ritual, that it hardened the body and closed it up tight and sent a person out into the world braced and strong. Others fretted that the shock was too much for the weak or the elderly and counselled a gentler cooling, but nearly all agreed that the movement between the temperatures, the heating and then the cooling, was itself the medicine, that it woke the sluggish body and set its inner tides flowing and drove out the heaviness of illness and age. And so the cold pool was not merely a pleasure, it was thought to be a healing, the bracing finish that made the whole long warm ritual complete. And a Roman lowered himself into it, with the confidence of a man taking good medicine that also, wonderfully, felt marvellous. This great cold hall was often the social heart of the place as well, the grandest chamber, where people gathered after their plunge to stand and talk and cool down and be seen. The vaulted ceilings soared above, held up by enormous columns, and statues gleamed in every niche, and the light came down cool and clear from the high windows. And the voices of the crowd rose up into the great echoing space and mingled with the gentle slap of water against the pool's edge. It was a place to linger, wrapped in a fresh linen towel, your skin tingling and glowing, your body cleansed and awake, greeting friends, catching up on the day's news, in no hurry at all to return to the world outside. The bathing itself was done. Now came the long, sweet social wind down, the best part of the evening for many, the hours of ease and talk and pleasure that the ritual of the water had earned, and all of it, every drop of it, hot and cold alike. The flow in the steaming pools and in this icy one, and the splash on burning faces and poured over tired heads, all of it had to come from somewhere, in quantities almost beyond belief, flowing into this one building day and night without ever ceasing. Where did all that endless flow come from? That is a wonder in itself, one of the greatest wonders of this civilization, and it is time I showed it to you. Come with me, in your mind, out beyond these walls, and out beyond the walls of the city itself, and let me show you the long stone rivers they built to carry it across the face of the land. Let us drift. For a little while, out of these halls entirely, out beyond the noise and steam, and follow it backward to its source, because the flow that fills these pools is one of the true marvels of this age, and it deserves a quiet chapter, all of its own. It is the water, after all, that gives this place its deepest voice. All evening, beneath every other sound, there has been the murmur of it, running and trickling and pouring and lapping, filling the pools and feeding the fountains and whispering through the channels, a sound so constant that the bathers stop hearing it, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. But it is always there, that gentle liquid murmur, the true lullaby of this place, and tonight, I want you to hear where it comes from. Follow it back then, out of the pools and up through the pipes, back to the great covered reservoir that feeds these halls, and back from there, out beyond the city walls, to a thing that will make you understand these people as almost nothing else can. Marching across the countryside toward the city, striding over valleys on great tiers of stone arches, boring straight through the hearts of hills, tracing the gentlest of downhill slopes across mile after mile after mile of land, comes a river that flows in a stone channel high above the ground. This is an aqueduct, and it is one of the supreme achievements of Roman engineering, and there were many of them, a dozen and more, all converging on the city from the distant hills, each one carrying a steady river of clean fresh water gathered from some far-off spring or mountain lake, and delivered by nothing but the patient pull of gravity and the genius of the men who surveyed its impossibly gentle slope into the heart of the city. Think about what it took to build such a thing, and to build it so well that it still ran true across all those miles. The surveyors had to find a source high enough in the distant hills, and then trace a path back to the city that fell, continuously at just the right gentle grade, never too steep, or the water would race and tear the channel apart, never too shallow, or it would sit and grow stagnant, but always falling, a few feet in every mile, along the long journey, over rivers and ravines and rising ground, holding that delicate slope the entire way. Where the land dropped away, they raised the channel up on those magnificent tiers of arches, some as tall as the tallest buildings you have ever seen, striding across the valleys with a beauty that was never even the point. That was simply the natural grace of a thing built superbly well. Where hills rose in the way, they tunneled straight through them, and at the end of it all, the water arrived, endlessly, day and night, year upon year, and poured into the city, and the abundance of it, once it arrived, is almost past believing. A great Roman city drank and bathed in more water, measured against each person who lived there, than many mighty cities managed again for the better part of 2,000 years afterward. It ran constantly, never turned off, flowing through the public fountains where the poor drew their daily supply, through the grand houses of the rich, and above all, through these halls, pouring endlessly into the pools and out again through the drains in a ceaseless, clean river. To the Romans, this was simply the given background of a civilized life, as unremarkable to them as it is to us when we turn a tap. They did not think of the hills it came from, or the arches it crossed, or the surveyors long dead who had traced its impossible path. It was just there always, murmuring in the pools, pouring from the spouts. The ordinary miracle beneath everything. There is something in that endless flowing water that speaks to the very soul of what the Romans were and what they valued. Other peoples built their greatest works to the glory of a god or a king, temples and tombs and towering monuments to the mighty dead. They built theirs, as often as not, to carry water to the ordinary living, so that a labourer in a great city could drink clean and bathe warm every single day of his life. There is a kind of practical, generous genius in that. A turning of the very finest engineering the world had yet seen toward the plain daily comfort of the many. And it is written into every arch of every aqueduct that still stands, striding across the countryside, carrying its long-vanished river toward a city that no longer needs it. And it is the sound of that abundance, that endless gift of water, pulled from the distant hills by patience and genius, and made to run forever through the city, that is murmuring around us still tonight, as we drift back now, in our minds, into the halls of the baths, where the good part of the evening, the soft anointed wind down is just beginning. For the hard cleansing is done now. The heat and the steam and the cold have done their work. And your skin is scraped fresh, and your pores are clean, and your body is loose and glowing and awake. And now comes the part the Romans loved best of all, the long, slow pampering at the end, the massage and the perfumed oils and the soft attentions, the part where a tired body was not merely cleaned, but truly, deeply cared for. But before we go to the couches, there is one more river feeding this place that I want to trace back for you, and it is not made of water at all. It is the oil, the golden stuff that began this whole ritual and lies at the very heart of it, and it came from as far away as the water did, and in quantities just as staggering. Come out with me, in your mind, into the silver groves. Let us drift out of the city once more then, and this time not up into the hills after the springs, but out across the sunlit countryside, over the sea, to the source of the other great river that fed this place, the river of oil. For everything we have watched tonight began with it. The oiling before the exercise, the warmed oil mingling with the sweat in the hot room, the blade drawing it away with the day's grime, the perfumed unguents smoothed into the clean skin at the end. All of it rested on a steady, enormous, unfailing supply of olive oil, and I want you to see where that came from, because it is as much a wonder as the aqueducts. Picture the groves in the long light of a late afternoon. They stretch away over the low hills for as far as you can see, rank upon rank of olive trees, their leaves turning silver and grey-green as the breeze moves through them. Their trunks gnarled and twisted and split with age, for an olive tree is a patient creature and may go on bearing for centuries, longer than the lives of all the people who ever tended it. The ground beneath is dry and stony and smells of dust and warm herbs. It is a quiet landscape, unhurried, unchanged for generations, and it clothed the hills of Italy and Greece and Spain and the whole northern coast of Africa. A vast silver sea of trees ringing the middle of the Roman world. The harvest came in the cool of the year, and it was hard, patient work. The pickers went out among the trees with long poles and beat the branches, so that the ripe fruit rained down onto cloths spread on the ground, or climbed among the boughs to pick by hand where the finest fruit was wanted, for fruit gathered gently made the better oil. Then the olives were carried to the press, and here the real labour began, the crushing of the fruit beneath great rolling stones, and then the pressing of the resulting pulp under enormous wooden beams weighted with stone, squeezing out the golden liquid a little at a time. The first pressing gave the finest oil, sweet and green and precious, kept for the table and for the anointing of skin. What came after, coarser and cheaper, went to the lamps and to the baths and to the scrubbing of the common bather, so that nothing whatever was wasted. And then the oil travelled, and the scale of that travelling is the thing that stops the breath. It was poured into great pottery jars, big-bellied vessels, each as tall as a child, and these were loaded by the thousand into the holds of merchant ships, and carried across the sea to feed the endless hunger of the capital. Ship after ship, season after season, year upon year, an unbroken stream of oil flowing toward the city from the groves of half the empire. And when the jars were emptied at the docks, they were too coarse and too oil-soaked to be much use again, and so they were broken up and thrown away, on and on, decade after decade, until the shards of them piled into a hill. There is a hill in Rome, a real hill that you may walk up even now, that is made of nothing but the smashed jars of that trade, millions upon millions of them. A whole mountain of broken pottery raised by nothing but the city's appetite for oil. Stand on it, and you are standing on the discarded packaging of centuries. Think what that means about the world we have been walking through tonight. The soft skin of the bather, the gleaming oiled shoulders in the exercise yard, the perfumed glow of a great lady at her mirror, all of it rested on this, on a vast patient machinery of groves and presses and jars and ships, on the labour of countless growers and pickers and pressers and sailors and porters, whose names are gone entirely, all of it turning ceaselessly, so that a person stepping into a bathhouse at the end of an ordinary day might have oil enough to be made clean. The Romans thought no more about it than they thought about the water in the pools. It was simply there, in every flask, in every changing room, in every town in the empire, as reliable as the sunrise. And there is something lovely in the thought that the whole of that vast enterprise, all those silver groves and labouring presses and crowded ships, existed in the end for such gentle purposes, to light a lamp, to dress a dinner, and to make the tired human body soft and clean and sweet-smelling at the end of the day. The great engines of Roman commerce turned, in no small part, so that ordinary people might be kindly cared for, and I find I cannot think of a better use for an empire's shipping than that. Now come back with me, out of the silver groves and across the sea and into the warm lamplit halls, where the oil ends its long journey, in the hands of the attendants waiting at the massage couches. Come with me to the massage tables. There is a quieter, warmer set of chambers, off to one side of the cold hall, given over entirely to the long, luxurious business of being cared for after the bath. And this is where I want to bring you now, because it is here that the evening turns from cleansing into pure tenderness. There are couches here, padded and low, and on them bathers lie stretched out and utterly relaxed, while skilled attendants work over their bodies with heated oil and knowing hands. The air is still and heavy with the scent of the good oils, and the only sounds are the soft slap and rhythm of the massage, the low murmur of contented voices, and beneath it all always, the distant murmur of running water. This was the reward at the end of the ritual, the deep landing, and a bather gave himself up to it completely. The massage was a serious art, and the attendants who practiced it were skilled specialists who knew the body intimately, knew where the day's tiredness gathered and knotted, knew how to find the tension in a shoulder or a back, and slowly, firmly work it loose. Warm oil was poured and worked into the skin, and then the hands went to work, kneading and pressing and stroking, running down the long muscles of the back, working into the stiff neck, pressing the tired feet, until the body on the couch had melted into a state of boneless, blissful surrender. Imagine it done to you. Imagine lying clean and loose on a soft couch after the heat and the cold, and scented oil being smoothed over your back and shoulders, and strong knowing hands beginning slowly to knead every last knot of tiredness out of your weary body. Feel how you would sink into that, how your breathing would slow, how the last resistance would go out of you. Some of these attendants were more than mere rubbers of tired backs. There were those skilled in an art of tending the body, who knew which pressures eased, which pains, who could work a strained muscle or a stiffened joint back toward ease, whose knowing hands were half masseur and half healer. The wealthy kept such people for themselves, prized them, guarded them, for a truly gifted pair of hands was worth a great deal to a body worn down by age or labour or the long soft aches of an idle life. And the ordinary bather, too, could have his turn under skilled hands for a small extra coin, could lie on the couch in the scented air and be worked back into ease by someone who had done it 10,000 times and knew every knot the human back could hold. And here, at the very end, came the finest part of the whole skincare ritual, the anointing, the moment the freshly cleansed and open skin was fed and perfumed and sealed. For remember what all that heat and scraping had done. The skin was now utterly clean, its dead surface lifted away, its pores wide open, as receptive as skin can be, and into that fresh open skin the attendants now worked the good oils. The perfumed and precious ones, olive oil steeped with roses or saffron or sweet resins, unguents thick and fragrant, smoothed over the whole body and into the face, sinking deep into the receptive skin, leaving it soft and supple and glowing and sweetly scented. This was the moment the daily bath became daily skincare of the most sophisticated kind. The clean skin sealed and nourished and perfumed all at once, so that a Roman left not merely clean, but positively luminous, their skin soft as a child's, faintly gleaming, and trailing a faint cloud of scent. Think of the wisdom hidden in that sequence, because it is genuinely close to what the finest skincare of our own age has only recently rediscovered. First you cleanse deeply, opening and clearing the skin. Then, and only then, while the skin is open and receptive, you feed it with oils and moisture and seal that goodness in. Cleanse, then nourish, then seal. The Romans did it in that exact order every single evening, with olive oil and hot water and perfumed unguents, and their skin, by every account we have, was the better for it. Soft and clear and cared for in a way that a hard life in a hard age had no right to produce. They had stumbled through nothing but close attention to the pleasures of the body, onto some of the deepest truths of how skin is truly kept well, and they built those truths into the daily rhythm of an entire civilization. Now oiled and perfumed and glowing, deeply relaxed and cared for, you are ready to be shown the secret I promised you at the very start of the night, all the way back in the honey-coloured street. For not everyone was content with the ordinary luxuries on offer. Some, the very greatest and richest women of Rome, went far beyond, into realms of skincare so extravagant and so strange that they have never once been forgotten. Come with me now to a quiet, private room, away from the crowd, where a great lady of Rome is being prepared for the evening, and let me show you the most famous beauty secret of the whole ancient world. There were private rooms in the greatest baths, and in the great houses too, set aside for the beauty rituals of the wealthiest women, and it is into one of these that I want to bring you now, quietly. For this is the heart of the secret I promised you, and it deserves a hushed and intimate telling. The room is softly lit and richly appointed, and in the centre of it stands something that will surprise you. It is a basin, a beautiful shallow tub of polished stone, but it is not filled with water. It is filled with milk. Pale, rich, faintly steaming milk, enough to bathe a whole body in, and a great lady of Rome is lowering herself into it now with a sigh of deep contentment, to soak her skin in the softest and most luxurious beauty treatment the ancient world could imagine. The most famous of all the women who did this was an empress, the wife of one of Rome's emperors. A woman renowned throughout the empire for the astonishing softness and paleness of her skin, and she guarded it with a devotion that became legendary. She bathed, it was said, in the milk of donkeys, believing, and not entirely wrongly, that it kept her skin soft and smooth and young, and she was so committed to this nightly ritual that she is said to have kept an enormous herd of donkeys, purely for the purpose, hundreds of them, and to have taken this whole gentle herd with her wherever she travelled, so that no matter where in the empire she found herself, there would always be fresh milk enough to fill her bath each evening. Picture that. A great lady moving across the roads of the empire in her curtained litter, and behind her, patient and dusty, a vast herd of donkeys, kept solely so that their mistress might never, for a single night, go without her milk bath. And here is the lovely thing, the thing that makes this more than just a tale of imperial excess. She was, in her way, right. We know now what she could only have guessed, that milk holds within it a gentle natural acid that very softly loosens and dissolves the dead surface of the skin, exactly the same principle, in fact, that lies behind some of the most sophisticated skin treatments sold at great expense in our own day. To soak the skin in milk was to give it a slow, mild, all-over renewal, dissolving away the dull dead outer layer and leaving the fresh soft skin beneath exposed and glowing. She did not know the chemistry of it. She only knew that it worked, that her skin, bathed nightly in milk, stayed soft and pale and lovely. And so she kept her herd of donkeys and soaked in their milk every evening of her life. And her name has come down to us across 2,000 years, partly for this alone, for the sheer devoted extravagance of her beauty. Nor was milk the only such secret. Honey, too, was prized, and rightly, for honey is a natural softener and soother of the skin, and a gentle draw-out of impurities. And it was worked into masks and salves, and smoothed over the face and body of many a Roman woman, who could not afford a herd of donkeys, but could stretch to a pot of honey. There were treatments made with the rich fat of wool, gathered from sheep's fleece, which softened the skin wonderfully even if it carried, by some accounts, a rather sour smell that the men of the household complained about. There were soaks in wine and rubs of crushed fruit, and a whole world of kitchen and garden ingredients, pressed into the service of soft skin. The Roman beauty cabinet was stocked, in the end, from the farm and the orchard and the beehive, from milk and honey and oil and wine. The good rich produce of the land turned to the gentle work of keeping the skin supple and lovely. It is worth pausing on how deeply these women studied their own beauty, How much knowledge and care and lore went into it, passed from mother to daughter, from mistress to maid, tested and refined across the generations. This was not idle vanity, whatever the sterner Roman moralist said. It was a body of practical wisdom, a real craft, the accumulated understanding of how the good things of the earth might be used to keep human skin soft and clear and lovely. And much of what these women knew by long experience, we have only recently confirmed by careful study, and much of it we still use. The great lady in her milk bath was the inheritor of a long tradition of women's knowledge, and she practiced it with all the seriousness of an art, because in her world, as in so many, a woman's beauty was bound up tightly with her worth and her power and her place, and its careful keeping was no trivial thing. Let the lady soak a while longer, in your mind, in her private room, with the lamps low and the pale surface trembling faintly whenever she moves. Somewhere beyond these walls, her donkeys are standing in their lines in the dark, shifting and breathing, waiting to be milked again before dawn. She does not think about them. Nobody in this story thinks about them, and yet it took a whole patient herd, and the men who walked them across the empire, and the maids who carried the pails, to make this one quiet quarter of an hour possible for one woman at the end of one day. That is the shape of her world, and of her beauty, and she lies in the middle of it, with her eyes closed. But we should leave her now, and return to the great public halls. For at this hour they are full of life and noise and human comedy, and I want you to hear the wonderful roar of it before the evening quiets. Come, let us step back out of the hushed private rooms and into the great public halls at their busiest and loudest, because the Roman baths were never, for most of the day, the tranquil place you might imagine, and I would be painting you a false picture if I let you believe so. They were, in truth, tremendously, gloriously noisy, a great roaring social hive, and the din of them was famous, complained about, written about, a byword for cheerful bedlam, and I want you to hear it now in full, because there is a deep comfort in it too, the comfort of human life crowded happily together, and because it will make the quiet that comes later, when the crowds drain away, all the sweeter. We know exactly how loud these places were, because a famous Roman writer once had the misfortune to lodge in an apartment directly above a bathhouse, and he wrote a wonderful complaining letter about the din that rose up through his floor all day long. And through his account, we can hear the halls of 2,000 years ago as clearly as if we stood in them ourselves. Listen to what he heard. There were the grunts and groans of the men straining at their heavy weights, huffing and gasping as they heaved. There was the sharp slap of the masseur's hands coming down on oiled backs and shoulders, a sound that changed its very note, depending on whether the hand struck flat or cupped. There was the splashing and shouting from the swimming pool, and the cries of the men who plunged in, making a great noisy show of it. There were the voices of the vendors calling their wares, the sausage seller and the cake seller and the drink seller, each with his own distinctive cry, ringing out through the halls. And, most memorably of all, there was the shrieking of the man whose unhappy task it was to pluck out the bather's unwanted hairs, and the even louder shrieking of the customers he was plucking. It is a wonderful, human, comic din. And it brings the place alive in a way that all the marble and mosaic never quite could. For these were not places of solemn, hushed cleansing. They were the great social clearing-house of the city. The place where the city met and mingled and did its living. Business was done here. Deals struck, contracts discussed, over the splash of the water. Gossip flew from mouth to mouth. The news and scandal of the city passing through these halls faster than anywhere else. Friendships were made, and quarrels had. Politicians worked the crowd. Philosophers held forth to little knots of listeners. Poets tried out their new verses on whoever would listen. Lovers arranged their meetings. The lonely came simply to be among people, to soak in the human noise of it, to feel a little less alone. The whole rich comedy of human life played out here every single day in the steamy halls against the constant murmur of the water. And there is something genuinely lovely in that, in the thought of it as the beating social heart of the city, the one spot where everyone came together, in a world without any of the ways we have now of reaching one another across distance. The baths were where you went to find your fellow creatures, to hear the news, to feel the pulse of the city, to be part of the crowd of ordinary life. A Roman who was sad, or lonely, or bored, or simply tired of his own four walls, went to the baths, and there, in the hot water and the roaring good-natured noise, he found the whole of humanity gathered together and felt himself part of it. It was medicine for the body and medicine for the spirit both, and the noise of it, that famous glorious din, was the sound of a whole people finding comfort in one another's company at the end of the day. There is a paradox in it worth resting on, that a place so loud could also be a place of such deep ease. For the noise here was not the harsh, anxious noise of the modern world, the noise that jangles and exhausts. It was the rounded, good-humoured noise of people at their leisure, of bodies at rest and minds unhurried, a noise with no edge of threat or demand in it. And a person could sink into it as into the pool itself and be soothed rather than wearied. There is a particular comfort, one we have half forgotten, in being alone in a crowd of the contented, in doing nothing in particular amid the pleasant hum of others doing the same, and these halls gave that comfort freely, the deep animal ease of the herd at rest, of being safely among one's own kind with nothing to fear and nothing to do. The noise is beginning to soften a little now, as the busiest hour passes and some of the crowd begins to drift homeward. But before it quiets entirely, I want to follow one particular thread of it, one set of those crying voices, the vendors, the sellers of food and drink and small pleasures who moved through the crowd, because the baths fed the belly as well as the skin, and no picture of them would be complete without the little feast that went on alongside. Come, let us find something warm to eat. Weaving through the crowds, calling their wares in the cheerful, competitive cries we have just been hearing, moved the vendors, and following them will show us another whole side of the pleasure of this place. For a visit here was a feast for the appetite, as much as for the skin, and the two went together as naturally as hot pools and rest. Let us follow the smell of food now. That thread of savoury warmth winding through the perfumed steamy air, and see what a Roman ate and drank in the long lazy hours of his bathing. The sellers moved everywhere, through the changing rooms and the courtyards and the great social halls, carrying trays and baskets of good things to eat, and calling out to the lounging bathers in voices pitched to carry over the general din. There were sausages, hot and spiced and dripping, a great favourite, their smell curling temptingly through the halls. There were little cakes and pastries, sweetened with honey and studded with nuts and dried fruit. There were eggs and cheeses and salted things to sharpen the thirst, and fresh bread still warm from some nearby oven. And to drink there was wine, of course, always wine, watered and cooled and passed around, and other drinks too, sweetened and spiced concoctions, and cool water for the thirsty. A bather could spend a whole long evening here and never once want for something good to eat or drink. Could drift from the hot rooms to a sausage to the cold plunge, to a cup of wine to a honey cake to a massage, in an endless slow procession of small bodily pleasures. There is a lovely unhurried indulgence in it, a giving over to the simple comforts of the body, that I think we have half forgotten how to do. The Roman at his ease was not distracted, not hurrying on to the next thing, not doing 3 tasks at once. He was there, wholly, in the perfumed halls, doing nothing but tending to his own comfort and pleasure. One small delight at a time, a little food, a little wine, a soak, a talk with a friend, a scrape and an oiling, another cup, the slow hours drifting by with nothing demanded of him, nothing to achieve or prove. Only the long sweet business of being comfortable and clean and fed and at ease among his fellow men. It was leisure of a deep and unhurried kind, and the Romans, for all their famous energy and discipline and conquest, knew how to give themselves over to it completely, every single evening. Of course, the moralists disapproved, as moralists always do. The stern old voices of Rome grumbled that all this bathing and eating and lounging was making the people soft, that their hardy ancestors had washed in cold river water and conquered the world, while their pampered descendants soaked in heated pools and stuffed themselves with sausages and grew idle and weak. There was always a strain in Roman thought that looked back with longing to a rougher, simpler, more virtuous past, and that saw in these pleasures a sign of decline. But the people paid these grumblers little mind, and went on bathing and eating and lounging with tremendous enjoyment. And who is to say they were wrong? For a hard-working person at the end of a long day, the hot water and the good food and the easy company were not decadence. They were the just and simple rewards of labour, the small daily pleasures that make a hard life bearable, and there is a wisdom in taking them that all the stern moralising in the world cannot argue away. Picture yourself among them now, in the social hall, wrapped in a towel, your skin clean and glowing, a cup of cool watered wine in your hand, and something warm and savoury to eat. No hurry anywhere in you, the evening stretching out soft and slow, the water murmuring, the crowd's good-natured roar washing over you, a friend beside you telling some long, comfortable story you were only half listening to. Feel how good that is, how complete, how entirely without anxiety or urgency. This was the deep genius of it, this creation of a space and a stretch of time in which a person could simply stop and rest and be well and want for nothing. It is a kind of peace we chase now with such difficulty, and the Romans built it into the ordinary rhythm of their days and found it, every evening, for the price of the smallest coin. But there is a whole side of the baths I have not yet shown you, and it is one that matters especially, for we have moved so far through halls full of men and their waits and their loud games, and I have not yet told you properly of the women, of how they too came here, and what these places meant to them, and how this whole world looked through their eyes. Come with me, and let me tell you of the women, for their story is its own, and it is a lovely one. I have spoken all evening of bathers, as though they were all alike, but of course they were not, and there is one great division in this world that I have saved until now, because it deserves its own quiet telling. For these halls belonged to the women of Rome as fully as to the men, and yet the women's experience of them was its own separate world, with its own rhythms and its own pleasures and its own careful rules, and I want to draw you into it now, because it is where so much of the beauty and the tenderness of this whole story truly lived. How the two came together, or were kept apart, is a question the Romans answered in different ways, in different places and different times, and it tells you much about their care for propriety. In many baths, the men and the women simply came at different hours. The women given the earlier part of the day, when the water was first heated, and the men the later afternoon and evening, when they had finished their work. In others, especially the grander places, there were entirely separate wings, a whole duplicate set of rooms, changing room and tepid room and hot room and cold, so that the women might move through the identical ritual in their own space, screened from the men entirely. Mixed bathing, men and women together in the same water, did happen and was known, but it was frowned upon by respectable people and associated with the disreputable, and more than one emperor tried to forbid it outright for the Romans. For all their ease about the unclothed body, drew careful lines about who might undress together, and within their own hours, or their own wing, the women made of these hours a world entirely their own, and by every account it was a rich and sociable one. Here the women of a neighbourhood came together, the matrons and the maidens and the old widows, the wealthy with their trains of attendants, and the poor with their single tunics. And they bathed and talked and tended themselves and one another in the steamy halls, free for a few hours of the eyes and demands of the men. Here the news of the neighbourhood passed from mouth to mouth, the marriages and the births and the deaths, the scandals and the matches, and the endless small dramas of a community's life. Here, mothers brought their daughters and taught them the arts of the bath and the care of the body. Here, friendships were deepened over the slow hours, and troubles shared, and comfort given. It was, for the women of Rome, something close to what it was for the men, a refuge, a gathering place, a bright world apart from the labour and confinement of ordinary life. And it was here, above all, that the great arts of beauty we have been exploring found their fullest home. For the women brought with them their oils and their perfumes and their little boxes of treatments, and tended their skin and their hair with all the accumulated lore of their craft, and shared their secrets and their recipes with one another in the steam. A young woman learned here, from her mother and her aunts and the older women, how to care for her complexion, how to dress her hair, how to keep herself lovely. The whole inheritance of feminine knowledge passed down in the halls from one generation to the next. These halls were, among everything else they were, a great school of beauty, an academy of the body's care, where the wisdom of soft skin and sweet scent and dressed hair was handed on, woman to woman, in the steam and the lamplight, exactly as it had been handed on for longer than anyone could remember. There is a particular tenderness in imagining that world, the women's world, so much of it lost to us now, so little of it written down by the men who kept the records. We catch only glimpses, a line here, a painted scene there, an object dug from the ground, and from these fragments we must imagine the rich life of it, the laughter and the gossip and the shared secrets, the mothers and daughters, the old women and the young. The whole community of women gathered in the hot water at the day's beginning or its end, tending themselves and one another, keeping the ancient arts of beauty alive among the steam. It is a world that would be easy to overlook, and I did not want us to pass it by because so much of what made it beautiful, so much of the care and the tenderness and the deep skill of the body's keeping, lived most fully there, among the women, in their own bright hours. And it is to the very heart of that feminine realm that I want to take you next, closer even than before, right up to the mirror itself, to watch a Roman woman prepare her face to meet the day. For we have spoken of how the skin was cleansed and softened, but we have not yet seen how it was painted and adorned. Come with me. It is time to open the beauty box of Rome. Let us go now to the most intimate and secret corner of the whole feminine world we have entered. A small private room where a wealthy Roman woman sits to have her face prepared, and where the true cosmetic art of the ancient face was practiced with all the seriousness of a sacred rite. There is a low chair here, and a table before it, bearing a polished disc of bronze or silver for a mirror, and laid out with care a whole array of the tools and materials of beauty, tiny pots and slender bottles, and little boxes of ivory and glass, each holding some precious powder or cream or coloured paste. This was the beauty box of Rome, and its contents were as carefully chosen and as highly prized as any jewels, for in this world a woman's face was her fortune, and its careful preparation was among the most important arts she could master. At the centre of it all was the pursuit of a smooth, pale, flawless complexion, for in Rome, as in many ages, pale skin was the great ideal, the mark of a lady who did not labour beneath the sun, and enormous effort went into achieving and preserving it. A Roman woman began by smoothing her whole face with creams and treatments to make the skin as soft and even as possible, and here the recipes become genuinely fascinating, because one of the great poets of Rome actually wrote them down. A little book of them, Recipes for the Care of the Face, and through his surviving verses we know exactly what a Roman woman smoothed onto her skin. There was a face pack, a mask, made of barley and vetch ground fine, mixed with eggs, with ground antler and narcissus bulb and honey and gum and a measure of Tuscan seed, all worked into a smooth paste and spread over the face to brighten and smooth the complexion. The poet promised with a smile that any woman who used it faithfully would come to shine, as he put it, smoother than her own mirror. And here is the quietly astonishing thing, the thing that ought to give you pause as you drift. Those recipes were good. We have looked at them again, in our own age, with all our modern knowledge, and found that the great majority of the ingredients that poet recommended are genuinely effective treatments for the skin. That barley and egg and honey and the rest really do brighten and smooth and soothe, and that several of them, the ground grains and the egg white and the honey, are still used in the making of skin creams and beauty treatments to this very day. A Roman woman spreading that barley and honey mask over her face 2,000 years ago was doing something very close to what a woman spreading an expensive modern mask over her face does tonight, and for very much the same reasons, and with, in the end, very much the same results. The deep continuity of it, across all those centuries, the same face, the same wish, the same honey, is one of the tenderest things I know about the ancient world. The poet who wrote those recipes, I should tell you, did a kind and unusual act in writing them, for most of the stern male voices of his age condemned women's cosmetics, sneered at the paint and the powder, wrote cruel little verses mocking the woman who was not as lovely without her colours as with them. He, almost alone, took a gentler and more generous view. He thought the care of one's appearance a reasonable and even admirable thing, a courtesy a person paid to the world and to themselves, and he wrote his little book of recipes, not to mock, but to help, to share real and useful knowledge with the women who wanted it. And he counselled moderation too, a natural loveliness, rather than a heavy mask, which was a wise and rather modern thought for his time. There is something winning in that, in a great poet turning his art to the friendly service of women's beauty, taking it seriously, wishing it well, and it has kept his little book of recipes alive and loved across 2,000 years, while grander poems have been forgotten. But not all of the ancient face was so wholesome. And honesty requires that I tell you the shadow side of this beauty as well, gently and once. For over the smoothed and treated skin, a Roman woman then applied her whitener, the pale paste that gave her face the fashionable ghostly paleness, and the finest and most prized of these whiteners was made from lead. The Romans knew, even then, that lead was a poison, and yet the pursuit of pale beauty was so powerful that women smoothed this soft white lead paste onto their faces day after day, year after year, slowly harming themselves in the name of loveliness. It is a sad and very human thing, that willingness to suffer for loveliness, and it did not begin with the Romans, and it has not ended with us. And I tell it to you not to darken the night, but because the woman at her mirror deserves the whole truth of her situation, its loveliness and its cost together. Over the white she brushed a blush of red for her cheeks and lips, made from red ochre, or the lees of wine, or crushed mulberry, and around her eyes she drew soft, dark lines and shadows with coal and powdered minerals, greens and blacks, to deepen and dramatize her gaze. And so, painted and adorned, pale and bright-cheeked and dark-eyed, she turned her prepared face to the polished mirror, and met her own reflection, and was ready to meet the world. There is a whole realm of scent still to come. For the painting of the face was only part of the adornment, and no woman of Rome, and few men, would have considered themselves ready to face the evening without being wrapped in a cloud of perfume. And Roman perfume was an art as deep and as ancient as any, a matter of roses and saffron and precious resins gathered from the far corners of the earth. Come with me to where the perfumes were kept, and let me open the scented bottles of Rome. Follow me now to where the perfumes were kept, a little alcove lined with shelves, and every shelf crowded with small and beautiful bottles. And the very air here thick and dizzying with mingled scent, for we have come to the perfumes of Rome, and fragrance was as central to the Roman idea of beauty and pleasure as clean skin itself. The bottles are lovely things in their own right, tiny vessels of coloured glass, blues and greens and golds, some no bigger than your thumb, each holding a few precious drops of some costly fragrant oil. And they catch the lamplight and glow like little jewels along the shelves. Take one up in your mind and draw the stopper and breathe it in, and let the scent carry you, for these people loved perfume with a passion and wore it lavishly, and spent fortunes on it. Their perfume was not the thin, bright spirit-based scent you might know today. It was oil, rich and slow. Olive oil or almond oil, steeped patiently with the fragrances of flowers and spices and precious resins, until it carried their scent deep within it. And the fragrances they chose were gorgeous and heavy. Roses above all, for the Romans adored the rose and grew them by the countless thousand, and pressed their petals for scent, and strewed them at feasts, and floated them upon wine. Saffron, precious and golden, gathered thread by thread from the hearts of countless small flowers. Sweet resins and gums from the trees of far-off eastern lands, frankincense and myrrh, carried across deserts and seas at enormous cost. The fragrant spikenard of distant mountains, cinnamon and the essences of 100 flowers and herbs. All of these were captured in oil and kept in these little glass bottles and smoothed onto the skin and worn as a soft cloud that announced a person before they arrived and lingered sweetly after they had gone. To be perfumed was, for a Roman, to be fully dressed, fully finished, fully ready. A wealthy Roman would perfume not just the body, but everything, the hair, the clothes, the very air of a room, and some, extravagantly, wore different scents for different parts of the body. One fragrance for the throat, and another for the arms, and another still for the hair. The freshly bathed and oiled and scraped and softened skin, opened from the baths, drank in these perfumed oils beautifully and held their scent for hours, so that a bather leaving in the evening trailed a soft wake of roses and spice through the cooling streets. Imagine it, the city at evening faintly perfumed, the crowds streaming home each wrapped in their own soft cloud of scent, roses and saffron and myrrh mingling in the dusk. It must have been one of the loveliest and least remembered things about the ancient world, its sheer fragrance, the perfumed air of a people who loved sweet smells and wore them without the least restraint. The trade that brought all these scents together was itself a wonder, a web of commerce, stretching to the very edges of the known earth and beyond. The frankincense and myrrh came from the far south of Arabia, tapped as fragrant gum from desert trees, and carried north by camel along ancient routes older than Rome itself. The spikenard and the spices came from mountains and forests far to the east, passed hand to hand along the long roads of trade until they reached the perfume makers of the Roman cities. Fortunes were made and lost in this trade in sweet smells, and the demand never slackened, for a people who perfumed everything needed an endless supply. And ships and caravans laboured constantly across the world to keep the little glass bottles of Rome filled with the scents of distant lands. There is something marvellous in the thought of it, the whole vast machinery of ancient commerce turning, in part, simply so that a Roman stepping from the baths might smell of roses. And there is a wisdom in it too, a recognition of something we sometimes forget, that scent reaches the heart more directly than almost anything, that a beautiful smell can soothe and gladden and comfort in a way that goes deeper than thought. The Romans understood that to wrap the body in a soft fragrance was to give it a real and simple pleasure, and to give that same pleasure to everyone who came near. Perfume was a kindness, in its way, offered to the world, a small beautiful gift of sweetness in the shared air. And it was the final touch of the whole long ritual of the bath, the last gentle grace note, the scent smoothed onto the soft, clean, glowing skin, so that a bather left not only clean and cared for, but sweetly, warmly, gorgeously fragrant. But this passion for hot water did not stay penned inside the cities. It ran out along the roads and down to the sea, and there was one shore in particular, far to the south, whose very name a respectable Roman could not say without a slight tightening of the mouth. Come away with me now, out of the streets entirely. I want to show you where the mighty went to misbehave. Let us leave the city behind entirely for a little while, and travel south in our minds to a place whose very name once made respectable Romans raise an eyebrow. A curve of beautiful coast where the earth itself gave up hot water from deep below, and where the rich and powerful of Rome came to bathe and idle and play. This was the most famous and most glamorous of all the Roman pleasure resorts. A sunlit crescent of bay ringed with the villas of the mighty, and it was as notorious for its indulgence as it was celebrated for its beauty. If the halls of the city were the daily comfort of ordinary people, this was the extravagant holiday of the great, and I want you to see it, because it shows another face of that love of hot bathing, the face of pure unashamed pleasure. Picture the bay in the golden light of a long afternoon. The sea is a deep and dazzling blue, calm within the sheltering curve of the coast. And all along the shore and up the green hills behind it stand the villas of the wealthy, gleaming white, and terraced and open to the sea breeze, each one grander than the last. Warm springs bubble up here from the volcanic ground, and the Romans channeled them into pools and baths and grottos, so that a person might soak in naturally hot mineral water with the blue sea stretching away before them and the sun warm on their face. There were baths cut into the very hillsides, warmed by the hot breath of the earth itself, and pools where the warm spring water met the cool sea, and every luxury that wealth and ingenuity could contrive for the delight of the body. It was a place given over entirely to ease, to the pursuit of comfort and joy, a coast dedicated to the good life. And oh, how the moralists disapproved of it. The stern voices of Rome wrote of this place, with a kind of horrified fascination, as a sink of luxury and vice, a place where sober men lost their heads and their virtue, where there was too much wine and too much idleness and too much freedom, where boating parties drifted singing across the bay at all hours, and the beaches rang with revelry, and the serious business of Roman life was forgotten entirely in the pursuit of pleasure. One famous philosopher warned that a person who cared for their character should stay away, should not so much as visit, for the very air of it was thick with indulgence, and the sight of so much abandoned pleasure was corrupting to the soul. He described the drunken wanderers on the shore, the wild parties on the water, the general atmosphere of a whole society letting go of its restraint, and he shuddered and told his readers to keep well clear. But of course they did not keep clear, not the emperors and the senators and the great ladies and the poets, who flocked to this beautiful coast in their thousands, built their villas along its shores, and gave themselves over, for a season, to its scented pleasures. For there is a deep human hunger beneath all the moralizing for exactly what this place offered: the release from duty, the hot water and the blue sea, the permission to stop being serious and simply be happy, to soak and idle and feast and love and let the great weight of the world slide off one's shoulders for a while. The Romans, for all their famous sternness, understood that hunger perfectly, and they built this whole glittering coast to feed it, and the greatest and most powerful among them came here, again and again, to lay down their burdens and be for a little while simply and unashamedly at ease. There is a lesson in that shore, gentle as everything else tonight, and it is one worth carrying towards sleep. The Romans were among the most disciplined and hard-driving people the world has ever known, conquerors and builders and lawgivers, and yet they knew, as we sometimes forget, that a life of nothing but duty and effort is no life at all, that the tired body and the weary spirit need their seasons of pure ease, their hot water and their blue sea, their permission to stop. And so even they, the hardest and busiest of peoples, made places like this, whole coasts given over to rest and pleasure, and went there without shame, and understood that the soaking and the idling were not the enemy of a good life, but a part of it. You are doing a small version of that tonight, lying warm and idle and at ease, laying down the weight of your day, and the Romans would have understood you perfectly and would have told you from their sunlit villas above the blue bay that you were exactly right to do it. But hot water was not only a delight to these people, and not only a beauty, and it is time now to turn to its deepest use of all, the one that stood beneath all the others. For the Romans believed, and rightly, that the hot bath was among the greatest healers there was, and their doctors prescribed it as gravely as any medicine. Come with me from the shore of delight to the healing one, and let me tell you how they understood bathing as a mender of the body, and how right in so many ways they turned out to be. Let us turn now from the surface beauty and the seaside pleasure to something deeper that lay beneath the whole institution of the baths. For the Romans did not think of bathing merely as delight, or as cleanliness, or even as beauty. They thought of it, profoundly, as health, as one of the very foundations of a sound and vigorous body, and their physicians prescribed it as seriously as any medicine. And in this, as in so much else, they were more right than they could possibly have known. So let me take you in your mind into the quieter and more thoughtful side of it, the side that understood hot water not just as a pleasure, but as a genuine healer of the body. The physicians of the city, the learned men who studied and tended the ailing, held bathing to be essential to health, and they built whole systems of medical advice around it. They prescribed the sequence of hot and cold, the sweating and the plunging, as a treatment for a great range of ills, for stiffness and aching joints, for troubles of the digestion, for low spirits and troubled sleep, for the general restoration of a body worn down by illness or age or the long labours of life. One of the most influential of the early physicians who worked at Rome built almost his whole practice around gentle and pleasant remedies of exactly this kind: hot baths and massage and wine and careful diet, rejecting harsh and painful treatments in favour of soothing the body back toward health. And he was enormously popular, as you might imagine, for a doctor whose prescriptions were pleasant is a rare and welcome thing in any age. They understood, these physicians, though not in our terms, that hot water soothed aching joints and tired muscles, that steam eased troubled breathing, that the whole ritual quieted the mind and lifted the spirits, and sent a person home, relaxed and restored. They did not have our knowledge of why these things worked, the deep workings of the body that make warmth and rest so healing. But they observed carefully and across many lifetimes that they did work, that people who bathed regularly were healthier and happier and slept more sweetly, and they made of that patient observation a gentle medicine of warmth and water, and prescribed it freely, and did, one imagines, a great deal more good with it than the harsher doctors of many later ages did with their bleedings and their purges. And beyond the ordinary baths of the city, there were special places, whole towns, that grew up around springs, where water came bubbling up from deep in the earth, already hot, rich in minerals, which the Romans held to be especially healing. And to these places, the sick and the tired and the wealthy came from all across the empire to take the cure and be restored. These were the great healing resorts of the Roman world, built around their springs, with elaborate baths and temples to the gods of health, and they drew a constant stream of pilgrims seeking a cure or simply a rest. A person suffering from some long complaint that the doctors of the city could not mend might make the long journey to one of these springs and soak for weeks in the mineral water and go home, often enough, genuinely better, whether from the minerals or the warmth or the rest or the deep power of hope itself. There is a wisdom in all of this that our own medicine has circled slowly back toward, the understanding that the body heals in warmth and rest and ease, that the quieting of the mind and the soothing of the muscles and the general lowering of the body's burdens are themselves a powerful medicine, that a person who is clean and relaxed and unafraid is a person whose body can do its own healing work. The Romans could not have explained to you the deep mechanisms that make this so, but they knew from long and careful watching that a body treated to hot pools and repose and gentle care grew stronger and calmer and sounder, and they built that knowledge into the daily life of a whole civilization and made the pursuit of health a pleasure rather than a punishment, which is perhaps the wisest thing any medicine has ever managed to do. And is that not, in the end, exactly what you are doing tonight? Lying warm and still and quiet, letting the cares of the day drain away, letting your body sink down, giving yourself over to warmth and quiet and calm. The Romans would have understood you perfectly. They would have recognized in your quiet evening the very same healing they sought in their warm water, the deep restoration that comes not from any drug or treatment, but simply from allowing the tired body to rest and be warm and be at peace. Now let me take you to one particular healing spring, the most sacred kind of all, where the hot water rose from the earth and the people believed a goddess herself dwelt within it, and where the sick came not only to soak, but to pray. Come, there is a holy pool I want to show you, steaming in the dusk. Let me take you now to a place at the very edge of the Roman world, far to the cold green north, where amid the mists and the rain there rose from the earth a spring of naturally hot water, steaming and strange, and where they built one of the most haunting and beautiful of all their bathing places, a bath that was also a temple, a pool that was also a shrine. For the Romans, coming to this far northern land of cold rivers and grey skies, found here a wonder that stopped them in their tracks, a spring that came up out of the ground already hot, steaming in the chilly air. And they did what they always did with such a marvel. They built around it magnificently, and they made it holy. The spring here rose deep and warm and endless, welling up out of the earth in a great steaming flood, faintly green, faintly strange smelling, with the minerals it carried from far below. And the Romans channeled it into a great sacred pool, and roofed the whole with a mighty vaulted hall, so that the hot water lay gathered and gleaming in the dim, echoing dark, breathing its steam up into the shadows of the roof. And beside the pool, they raised a temple to the goddess they believed lived within the waters, a goddess of healing and of the warm spring, a blending of a local deity of the place with one of their own gods. And to her the sick and the suffering came from far and wide, to bathe in her hot spring and to beg her for a cure. Imagine standing at the edge of that sacred pool in the failing light of a northern evening. The great hall is dim and vast, its roof lost in shadow far above, and the hot spring lies still and green and gently steaming, and the steam rises and curls in the cold air and catches what little light there is. And the whole space is hushed with a reverence quite unlike the cheerful roar of the city baths. This was a holy place, a place of prayer as much as of bathing, and the people who came here came in hope and in fear, carrying their pains and their griefs to the goddess of the spring, believing that she could heal what no physician could. The very air of the hall was thick with longing, with the unspoken prayers of the sick, with the desperate hope of people who had come a long, hard way to this steaming pool as their last chance of ease, and they left her gifts, these pilgrims, and threw them into her sacred waters. And it is through these that we can still, across all the centuries, touch the hopes and fears of the ordinary people who came here. They cast coins into the spring, offerings to the goddess, small payments for her favour. They threw in precious things, jewels and ornaments, gifts to win her healing. And most movingly of all, they threw in little folded sheets of thin metal, on which they had scratched their prayers and their pleas, their desperate messages to the goddess of the spring, and many of these have been recovered from the spring. And through them, we hear the actual voices of the people who stood where you are standing 2,000 years ago. Some begged for healing, some, wronged by a thief who had stolen their belongings while they bathed, begged the goddess for justice, called down her power upon whoever had taken their cloak or their coins, named their suspects, pleaded for her to make it right. It is a strange and moving thing to hold in your mind those little folded prayers, the ordinary human troubles of people so long dead, their thefts and their pains and their small injustices, carried in hope to the warm and steaming water. There is something in that sacred pool that gathers up the whole meaning of the Roman bath and lifts it toward the holy, and I wanted you to see it before the night ended. For beneath all the pleasure and the beauty and the sociable roar, the hot water always carried, for these people, a deeper meaning, a sense that to be soothed and cleansed and healed by warmth was somehow close to the divine, that the springs that rose warm from the earth were gifts of the gods, that the whole business of the bath touched on the sacred care of the body and the spirit both. The city baths were loud and cheerful and unholy, and yet even they carried a faint echo of this deeper thing, this sense that warm water heals and blesses, that to tend the body is a kind of reverence. And here, at this steaming northern spring, that echo swelled into a full and solemn music, and the bathing became a prayer. Let us leave the goddess to her steaming pool and her pilgrims to their hopes, and turn back toward the gentler and more ordinary pleasures of the body, for the night is deepening, and there are still a few last graces of the Roman toilet I want to show you before we let the whole world quiet towards sleep. We have tended the skin and soaked the body, and healed and prayed. There remains the crowning of it all, the care of the hair, and the small final attentions that finished a Roman's long ritual of beauty. Come with me back to the mirror and the comb. Let us come now to the care of the hair. For no picture of the beauty of Rome would be complete without it, and the tending of a wealthy Roman woman's hair was an art so elaborate and so demanding that it required its own devoted specialist, a servant whose entire life was given to the building of those extraordinary constructions. Picture the scene. A great lady sits before her polished mirror in the soft lamplight, and behind her stands her hairdresser, an enslaved woman of great skill, her hands full of combs and pins and ribbons and heated irons, at work on a coiffure of quite astonishing complexity. For the hairstyles of the fashionable world were not simple things. They were architecture built upon the head with patience and artistry over a long and often painful hour. The great ladies of Rome wore their hair piled and curled and braided into towering intricate structures, coiled high above the brow, woven into elaborate plaits, studded with pins of gold and ivory, sometimes built up over pads and frames into shapes that rose like crowns above the face. Fashions changed constantly, and a woman of standing had to keep pace with them, and each new style seemed more elaborate than the last, requiring hours of patient work to build. The curling irons were heated in the coals and used to set tight ringlets, one by one, all across the front of the head. The hair was pinned and repinned, section by section, into its towering shape, and it was all held together with countless pins and a good deal of skill, and one imagines no small amount of discomfort, for the tightness of those constructions cannot have been easy to bear. The hairdresser's task was demanding and delicate and endless, and a clumsy one might feel her mistress's sharp displeasure, for a lady's hair was a public statement of her wealth and her status and her taste, and it had to be perfect, for those whose own hair would not achieve the desired effect. There were other means, and the trade in them stretched across the empire. Wigs and hairpieces were common, some of them made from hair of striking colours, pale golden hair brought from the peoples of the cold north, or glossy black hair from the distant east, imported at great expense to be woven into the coiffures of Roman ladies who longed for a colour nature had not given them. There were dyes too to darken the greying head, or to lighten the dark, some of them harsh and some of them harmful, and treatments and oils to keep the hair thick and glossy, and a whole small industry of hair care and hair fashion that a wealthy woman navigated with the help of her skilled attendant. The care of the hair was, in its way, as demanding an art as the care of the face, and as important. And a Roman woman of standing gave hours of her life to it, seated patiently before her mirror, while clever hands built beauty upon her head. The fashions themselves tell a story, for they changed with the times as fashions always do. And a woman who knew the styles could read in another's hair the whole tale of when she was young and what she admired. In one age, the great ladies wore their hair in high curled ramparts above the brow, a whole frontage of tight ringlets rising like a diadem. In another, the fashion turned to smooth centre-parted styles, the hair drawn back softly and coiled low. The women of the imperial court set these fashions, as the great and glamorous always do, and the women of the city followed as best they could, and a lady's maid had to know them all and master each new one as it came, keeping her mistress always in the very latest mode, for to be seen in a style 2 seasons old was a small, quiet humiliation that no woman of standing would willingly endure, and yet beneath all the elaboration, the thing itself was simple and human and familiar, the same quiet ritual that has soothed people forever, the tending of the hair by careful hands. There is a deep and ancient comfort in having one's hair brushed and arranged by another, a comfort that goes back to our very beginnings, to the grooming that binds us one to another, that says, in a language older than words, "You are cared for, you are tended, you are not alone." The great lady before her mirror, for all the towering elaboration of her coiffure, was receiving at bottom that same simple ancient comfort, the soothing of patient hands at work upon her hair. And it is one of the gentlest images this world has to offer, the lady and her maid together in the lamplight, the slow, careful work, the quiet trust between them. The tending is almost complete now, the body cleansed and softened and scented, the face painted, the hair built into its lovely shape. There remain only the smallest and most careful attentions, the little finishing touches of grooming that a Roman gave to the last details of the body. And once we have seen those, we will have followed the long ritual of Roman beauty from its very beginning to its very end. Come with me for the last of it, the small attentions. And then we will begin to let this whole warm world quiet toward the night. There remained, at the very end of the long ritual of the bath, a whole set of small and exacting attentions to the finest details of the body, the little finishing touches of grooming. And I want to show you these last small tendernesses before we let the halls quiet toward the night. Because there is something touching in the care the Romans lavished on even the smallest parts of themselves. For their ideal of a well-kept body was thorough, and it reached all the way down to the details, to the hands and the nails and the smoothness of the skin, and there were attendants who specialized in each of these little arts. There was, first, the matter of unwanted hair, for the fashion of the age, for both women and men of certain classes, favoured a smooth and hairless body, and the removal of hair was a regular part of grooming. This was the work of a particular attendant, and it was, by the sound of those famous complaints about the noise, not always a comfortable business, involving, as it did, the plucking out of hairs one by one, which drew from the customers those loud cries that rang through the halls. There were gentler methods too, pastes and resins to lift the hair away, and the pumice stone to smooth the skin. But however it was done, the smoothing of the body was a regular attention, another part of the thorough Roman care of the physical self. It sounds an odd thing to include in an evening's pleasure, and yet it was simply one more way in which the body was tended and made smooth and cared for. Then there was the care of the hands and the feet, the trimming and cleaning of the nails, the smoothing of rough and calloused skin, the small, precise attentions that leave a person feeling truly finished and well kept. There were attendants skilled in this too, working with little tools of bronze, tending the hands that did the day's labour, and the feet that carried the day's weight, and there is a real tenderness in the thought of it. The tired feet of a labourer, or the soft hands of a lady tended with equal care in the warm lamplit halls. Even the teeth were seen to, cleaned and freshened with powders and rinses, for the Romans valued a clean, bright smile and a sweet breath as we do, and had their own preparations for achieving them, ground and mixed from all manner of ingredients, some pleasant and some, it must be said, rather less so. And there was the barber, the tonsure, a figure of real importance in the Roman world, for a man's beard and hair were as much a matter of fashion and status as a woman's coiffure, and the barber's shop, like the baths themselves, was a great centre of gossip and news and idle male sociability. Here a man had his beard shaved with a keen iron razor, no comfortable business in an age before fine steel and soothing creams, or his hair trimmed and dressed, and heard all the talk of the town while he waited his turn. And the barber worked and chattered and shaved, and the whole slow social business of male grooming went forward exactly as it does in such places still. The Romans were, in the end, tremendously particular about their appearance, men and women alike, and gave to the care of it a great deal of time and money and attention, and thought it rightly one of the plain good practices of a civilized life. There is a lesson in that thoroughness, I think, gentle as everything else tonight. They did not regard the care of the body as vanity, or as a thing to be rushed through and gotten over with, or as somehow beneath the dignity of a serious person. They regarded it as one of the plain good practices of a civilized life, worthy of time and attention and skill, a daily honouring of the body that carried you through the world. To tend the body carefully, to keep it clean and smooth and comfortable and well, was to a Roman simply part of living well, as natural and as necessary as eating good food or keeping cheerful company. And there is a wisdom in that we might do well to recover, in our hurried and often self-neglecting age, the understanding that the patient tending of the body is not vanity but a kind of respect, a way of caring for the one vessel that carries us through the whole of our lives. Before we let the city baths quiet toward sleep, I want to carry you once more to the very edge of the Roman world, to a small and humble bathhouse, very different from the marble palaces we have wandered tonight. Because it will show you something about these people that the grandeur never quite can, the way they carried this whole warm ritual of comfort with them, even to the coldest and loneliest edges of their empire. Come with me to the frozen frontier, and let me show you a soldier's bath at the end of the world. Let us travel now in our minds as far from the warm and glittering city as it is possible to go and still stand on Roman ground, to the very last edge of the empire, the cold and windswept northern frontier where Roman rule ended and the wild lands began. Here, along a great wall of stone that ran across the neck of a misty northern island, the soldiers of Rome stood their lonely watch, far from home, in a land of grey skies and cold rain and short bitter days. And here, even here, at the very end of the world, the Romans built their baths. And there is something in that, in the little bathhouse at the frozen frontier, that moves me more than all the marble grandeur of the capital. And I wanted to bring you here before the night was done. Picture the fort in the failing light of a cold northern afternoon, a square of stone walls set on a bleak green ridge, with the wind moaning across the empty hills and the rain coming in grey curtains off the moor. Inside the walls, the soldiers go about their duties, men drawn from all across the empire, from sunlit southern lands, many of them, posted now to this wet grey edge of everything, as far from the warm baths of home as they could possibly be. And there, just outside the fort walls, down by the little stream, stands the bathhouse, small and plain and stone-built, its furnace sending up a thin thread of smoke into the wet grey sky, and inside it, wonderfully, impossibly, all the comforts of home in miniature, the changing room and the warm room and the hot room and the cold, the whole beloved ritual carried half around the earth and set down here, at the end of it, for the comfort of chilled and homesick men. Imagine what that little bathhouse meant to those soldiers. A man who had grown up in the warm south, who had bathed as a boy in some sunlit city bath, with the ritual of oil and strigil and hot bathing woven into the very fabric of his days, and who now found himself here, on this cold wet wall at the end of the world, standing watch in the rain against the wild peoples of the north, could go, at the end of his freezing duty, down to this small stone bathhouse, and step out of the rain and the wind, and feel the heated floor beneath his feet, and sweat in the hot room, and be scraped clean, and soak the chill of the frontier out of his aching bones. It was a piece of home, of civilization, of warmth and comfort, and the familiar beloved ritual, carried to the very edge of the possible and kept burning there against the damp and the dark and the loneliness. It must have been, to those men, one of the dearest things in their hard, exiled lives. And we know, from the small everyday things they left behind, dug up now from that sodden ground, how real and how human those men were, how they felt the chill of that posting in their bones. They wrote home, some of them, and their letters survive, and in them they speak of ordinary things, of the weather and the food and the news of the family, and one, touchingly, of warm socks and warm underthings sent out to a soldier against the northern chill, the small tender care of someone far away trying to keep a loved one from the chill at the end of the world. When you hold that in your mind, the socks sent across half an empire, and then think of that same cold soldier sinking gratefully into the hot water of the little frontier bathhouse, it becomes almost unbearably human, and you feel, across 2,000 years, exactly what that warmth meant to a man far from home in the cold and the rain. There is something in that little bathhouse at the edge of the world that says everything about what the baths truly were to these people. They were not a luxury, not really, not at the deepest level. They were a comfort, a warmth, a piece of the old life, a way of caring for the tired and the cold and the far from home body that a person carried with them, even to the ends of the earth. Wherever the Romans went, however far, however bleak and hostile the land, they built their baths, because the hot water and the clean skin and the eased body were, to them, not indulgence, but the very mark of a civilized life. The thing that made a place livable, the small daily warmth that kept the darkness and the chill and the loneliness at bay. And that, in the end, is a deeply human thing to carry to the ends of the earth, the determination to be warm and clean and cared for wherever you find yourself. However far from home, now let us leave the frontier and its brave homesick soldiers and come back south with me, out of the rain, into the lamplight. For there is something I have let you walk past all evening without ever properly looking at it, something under your feet and over your head and all around you. Come back to the city with me. And this time do not look at the people at all. Look at the surfaces. Before we come to the sheer scale of the greatest baths, I want you to stop and look down, and then up and all around you at the surfaces of this place. Because the Romans clothed these halls in beauty from the floor to the vault, and a bather moved all evening through a world of art without ever quite noticing it. The way you move through the ordinary furniture of your own days. Let us pause here, in one of the grander halls, and truly see the decoration that the hurrying bathers took for granted. For it is one of the loveliest and least remembered glories of the whole Roman bath. Look down first at the floor beneath your feet, for the floors were laid in mosaic, in tiny cut cubes of coloured stone and glass fitted together, thousands upon thousands of them, into pictures and patterns of astonishing richness. And the pictures they loved most for their bathing floors were, fittingly, of the sea and its creatures. Here beneath your feet swims a whole watery world in stone, dolphins leaping through frozen waves, fish of every kind darting among painted seaweed, sea gods with beards of curling weed riding through the surf on strange fish-tailed horses, nymphs and tritons and all the teeming life of the ocean, laid out in coloured stone across the floor, so that a bother walked, in a sense, upon the very sea itself. It was a witty and a lovely thing, to floor a place of water with images of water, and the craftsmen who made these floors were masters of their art, able to catch the shimmer of a scale or the curl of a wave in nothing but little cubes of coloured stone. Now lift your eyes to the walls, for they too were clad in beauty, sheathed from floor to shoulder height and beyond, in slabs of polished marble brought from every corner of the empire. There was honey-gold marble from the deserts of the south, and green-veined marble from the mountains of Greece, and deep purple stone flecked like a starry sky, quarried at fabulous cost from a single mountain in the eastern desert, and reserved almost for emperors, and white marble and black, and stone the colour of dried blood, and stone that seemed to hold whole landscapes in its swirling grain. The Romans loved coloured marble with a deep passion, and they gathered it from the ends of the earth, and cut it into thin sheets, and fitted these together across the walls of their baths in great patterns of colour, so that the very walls glowed and gleamed like the inside of a jewel box in the light of the lamps. And above the marble, where the walls curved up into the vaults overhead, there was colour still, painted stucco moulded into intricate patterns and picked out in bright colours and gold, and in the grandest baths, mosaic climbing even up into the vaults. Made not of stone now, but of glittering glass, gold and blue and green, catching and throwing back the light so that the very ceilings shimmered. And everywhere, in niches along the walls, in the halls and the quiet corners alike, stood statues, gleaming figures of marble and bronze, gods and goddesses and heroes and athletes, some of them among the very greatest works of art the ancient world produced, set out casually for the ordinary bather to walk among as though beauty of that order were simply the natural furniture of daily life. Think what it meant to move through such a place every single evening. A Roman of no great wealth, who lived in a plain and cramped and colourless few rooms, could come here each day and walk on floors of leaping dolphins, between walls of glowing coloured marble, beneath shimmering golden vaults, among statues fit for a palace, and could soak in warm water surrounded by more beauty than most people in most ages have ever laid eyes on in their lives. It was a daily immersion, not just in warm water, but in beauty, freely given, a democratic feast of art and colour and craft laid out for everyone for the price of the smallest coin. And the Romans, walking through it evening after evening, grew so used to it that they hardly saw it at all, which is perhaps the surest sign of how rich a world it was, that such splendour could become the ordinary, unremarked background of an ordinary person's day. And all of this, remember, we have been admiring at everyday size in a plain neighbourhood house. Hold that in your mind, and then come with me, because the emperors were not content with anything so modest. For the house we have wandered through tonight, splendid as it is, could be grander still. In the great imperial complexes of the capital, raised by the emperors themselves as gifts to the people of Rome, the scale reached heights that can still, from their colossal surviving ruins, take the breath clean away. Let me give you a sense of it. The greatest of these bathing complexes covered an expanse of ground as large as a small town, and could hold many thousands of bathers at one time, all of them moving through halls built on a scale that dwarfed the human figure entirely. The vaulted ceilings soared to heights that would shame a great cathedral, held up on columns of coloured marble so vast that a person standing at the base could not have reached even a fraction of the way around them. The great cold hall alone, the central chamber where the cold pool lay, was a covered space so enormous, so daring in its span, that architects of far later ages studied its ruins in wonder and modelled their own grandest buildings upon it. To stand in a space like that, roofed so high overhead, was to feel oneself shrink to the size of an ant, and to marvel that human hands had raised such a thing at all. And these vast halls were not bare. They were filled, as we have seen, with the richest materials and the finest art the empire could gather, but on a scale to match their size, marble by the acre, mosaic by the mile, and statues not by the handful, but by the hundred, some of them so enormous and so magnificent that they are counted among the supreme achievements of ancient art. Great carved groups taller than a house stood in the halls of these baths, whole scenes of gods and heroes wrought from single colossal blocks of marble, so that the bathers moved among works of an ambition and a grandeur that we can scarcely imagine encountering in a place of ordinary daily leisure. It was as though the greatest art of the age had been gathered up and set out, not in some guarded treasury, but in the public baths, for the enjoyment of anyone at all who wandered in, and the bathing was only a part of what these great places offered, for they were whole worlds of leisure and culture under one enormous roof. Beyond the bathing halls stretched everything a cultivated Roman might wish for, and I will show you those wider spaces in a moment. The gardens and the reading rooms and the places of quiet retreat. But stand a moment first in the middle of one of these vast vaulted halls, in your mind, and simply look up and around at the scale of it. And let it work upon you the way it must have worked upon the Romans who came here from their small and ordinary lives. To step from a dim little apartment up 3 flights of stairs into a space like this, all soaring marble and coloured light and gleaming colossal statues and the echoing music of water, must have lifted the heart every single time. It said, "This too is yours." This beauty, this abundance, this immensity, this is not only for the emperor and the senator, it is for you, the ordinary person, offered freely every evening at the end of your working day. Whatever else was cruel and hard in the Roman world, and a great deal was, this was a genuine and daily kindness, a sharing out of beauty and comfort and grandeur on a scale the world had rarely seen and would rarely see again. And it is worth honouring for that, even across all the long centuries between. The emperors built these places partly to be loved, of course, partly to buy the goodwill of the people with marble and warm water, and yet the gift was real for all that, and the pleasure it gave was real, and the ordinary Roman who soaked beneath those soaring vaults was genuinely, daily enriched by it. But the water, believe it or not, was only ever half of what these enormous places offered. Come with me through the side doorway, out of the echoing marble and into the open air. There are trees ahead. Come with me out of the great bathing halls and into the grounds that surrounded them. For the largest baths were set within vast enclosed parklands, whole gardens and precincts of green and quiet and cultivation. And a Roman could spend the gentlest hours of the evening here, strolling among the trees and the fountains, far from the roar of the pools and the crowd. This was the outer, quieter world of the baths, and it is one of the loveliest and most surprising parts of the whole, and I have saved it for this late hour, because it is exactly the kind of soft green peace you need now, as the night draws in around you. Step out into the garden. The halls rise behind us now, vast and warm and echoing, but here the air is cool and green and open, and the sounds of the crowd fade to a distant murmur beneath the nearer sounds of the garden. The plash of fountains, the whisper of leaves, the evening song of a bird settling to roost. Broad gravelled walks run between beds of shrubs and flowers and rows of dark cypress and pine, and here and there a fountain plays, its water catching the last of the light, and stone benches stand in shaded corners where a person might sit alone with their thoughts or with a friend. People are strolling here in the cool of the evening, freshly bathed and softly perfumed, their bodies eased, their minds unhurried, taking the air among the trees before they turn at last toward home. It is a place of deep and civilized peace, a garden made for the gentle end of a pleasant day, and ranged around these gardens, in the great imperial baths, were rooms for the mind as well as the body, for the Romans understood that a truly civilized leisure fed the spirit as well as the flesh. There were libraries here, real libraries, rooms lined with the pigeonholes that held the rolls of books, one room for works in Greek and another for works in Latin, where a literate Roman might come and read between his baths, or instead of them, settling in the quiet with some beloved author while the water murmured in the distance. There were rooms where philosophers lectured and teachers taught and men gathered to hear wisdom discussed. There were halls for music and for poetry. A person might come here and never bathe at all, might come only to read in the library or to hear a lecture or to stroll in the garden or to meet friends and talk. For these places were not merely baths, but great centres of the whole cultivated life. The Roman idea of civilization gathered under one enormous roof and offered freely to the people. Imagine the whole rich range of it. The many ways a person might spend a long evening here. One man exercises hard in the ball court, and then sweats and plunges and is scraped clean and massaged, giving his whole evening to the care of his body. Another never goes near the water at all, but spends his hours in the library, deep in a book, looking up now and then to watch the light change through the high windows. A third strolls the gardens with a friend, deep in slow conversation. The evening long, a fourth listens, rapt, to a philosopher unfolding some deep question in a quiet lecture room. A group of young people laugh and flirt in a shaded corner of the garden. An old scholar dozes over a roll in the warmth of the library. All of them here, in this one vast place, each finding their own pleasure, each fed in their own way, all of it freely given. All of it part of the same great gift. There is something in that breadth of vision that I find genuinely moving. The Roman idea that leisure should be rich and various and cultivated. That the good life was not merely warm water and a full belly, but also books and gardens and beauty and talk and the free play of the mind, and that all of it, the bodily pleasures and the pleasures of the spirit alike, should be gathered together and offered freely to the whole people in these great public palaces of ease. It was a generous and a humane idea, whatever its mixture of motives, and the world has not always managed to hold on to it since. This notion that beauty and cultivation and rest are not luxuries for the few, but the birthright of everyone, to be provided freely and enjoyed in common. The Romans built that idea in marble on a colossal scale and filled it with warm water and books and gardens and art and gave it to their people, evening after evening, for the smallest coin there was. But someone had to run all this, someone had to make it work, to light the fires and heat the water and open the doors and keep the enormous machinery of ease turning, day after day. And I have not yet shown you that quiet essential figure, or the daily rhythm by which the baths woke and worked and slept. Come with me as the evening deepens, and let me show you how the baths were run, and how their long day turned, from the first fire before dawn to the last lamp at night. Before the place quiet toward their night, let me show you the hidden daily rhythm of the place, the great turning wheel of work by which it woke and warmed and served and slept. Because a bathhouse of any size was a complicated machine that had to be tended without pause. And behind all the ease and pleasure we have wandered through tonight stood a whole world of labour and management that the happy bather never thought about at all. Let me introduce you quietly to the people who made the hot water flow. At the head of it all stood the bathkeeper, the manager of the enterprise, who often leased the baths from their owner, whether a private citizen or the city itself, and ran them as a business, or oversaw them as a public trust. It was his task to keep the complicated thing working, to buy the endless fuel the furnaces devoured, to hire and command the many workers, to collect the entrance coins, to keep the water flowing and the fires burning and the crowds content, to see to the 1,000 daily details on which the smooth running of the place depended. It was a real and demanding job, the management of one of these great machines of pleasure, and a good bathkeeper, whose pools were always hot, and whose halls were always clean, and whose service was always smooth, was valued and known and spoken well of, while a poor one, whose pools ran tepid and whose rooms were dirty, heard about it soon enough from a disappointed public, and beneath him laboured the hidden population of workers we have glimpsed all evening, most of them enslaved, without whom the baths could not have run for a single hour. There were the furnace men, sweating in the dark below, feeding the endless fires. There were the watermen, who tended the pipes and the pools, and kept the flow running clean. There were the attendants of the changing rooms, who guarded the bathers' clothes and belongings. There were the masseurs, and the scrapers, and the hair pluckers, and the perfumers, and the specialists in every small art of the body's care. There were the cleaners, who scrubbed the floors and drained and refilled the pools, and kept the whole vast place fit to receive the public. A great bath was a hive of hidden labour, a whole working community toiling behind the scenes, so that the bathers in front might drift from pleasure to pleasure without a care. And almost none of these workers has left us so much as a name. Consider the daily turning of it, the great rhythm by which the place lived. Long before dawn, while the city still slept, the furnace men were already at work, waking the fires, beginning the slow hours of heating that would bring the water and the rooms up to their proper warmth by the time the doors opened. All through the morning, the heat built, the water warmed, the workers made ready. And then, around the middle of the day, when the heat was right, the signal was given. The bell or the gong we heard at the very start of the night, ringing out across the rooftops to tell the city that the water was hot and the baths were open, and the people came in their gathering crowds, and the long busy afternoon and evening of pleasure began. And it ran on, hour after hour, the crowds flowing through, until at last, as night came down, the fires were let die, and the last bathers drifted home, and the doors closed. And the workers began the long labour of cleaning and setting to rights, readying the place for it all to begin again before the next dawn. There is a whole human world in that daily rhythm, a world of labour and skill and unremarked toil, turning ceaselessly beneath the surface of all that ease, and I did not want us to leave the baths without honouring it. The countless working lives that made the ease of the many possible, every warm pool a bather sank into, every hot floor beneath a resting foot, every clean scraped back and each perfumed shoulder, rested on the labour of people who worked in heat and steam and drudgery so that others might be soothed, and who shared little enough in the pleasure they created. It is the old truth beneath so much of the beauty of that age and of all ages, that the comfort of some is built on the toil of others, and the honest thing, even on a gentle night, is to hold it quietly in mind, and to spare a thought as the fires die and the doors close, for the tired workers setting the great place to rights in the dark. And now the long day of the baths is turning, at last, toward its end. The fires are dying, the crowds are thinning, the light is failing beyond the high windows, and the attendants are moving through the emptying halls with their tapers, waking the lamps against the coming dark. Come with me, and let us watch the baths as they quiet toward the night, for there is a particular beauty in that slow emptying, and it is exactly the beauty you need now. As you too begin to drift down toward your rest, before the crowds drain away entirely, let me linger a moment longer among the people themselves, the great human cast of the baths, because after all the marble and the water and the ritual, it was the people who made the place what it was, and a bathhouse was a theatre of human character, as rich and various as any the world has known. Let us stand quietly to one side, in the warm, thinning crowd, and simply watch them for a while. The whole comedy of humanity gathered here at the day's end, for they are as alive and as recognizable, these people, as anyone you might meet tomorrow. There were the regulars, first of all, the men and women who came every single day, whose whole lives turned upon the evening visit, who had their favourite corner and their favourite hour and their circle of bathing friends, and who would no more miss their daily soak than miss their daily bread. They knew everyone, these regulars, knew all the gossip and all the faces, greeted the attendants by name, and settled into the halls each evening with the deep contentment of a person entirely at home. And there were the show-offs, the men who came to display themselves, flexing at their weights where the crowd was thickest, plunging into the pool with the loudest possible splash, talking a little too loudly of their importance and their connections, performing their own grandeur for whoever would watch, exactly as such men perform in every gathering place in any age. There were the hangers-on too, the smooth and hungry men who haunted the baths in hope of an invitation to dinner, attaching themselves to the wealthy, laughing at their jokes, flattering and fetching and making themselves agreeable, all in the hope of a free meal at a rich man's table, and the poets sharpened their wit on these unfortunate creatures, mocking them cruelly in clever little verses. There were the philosophers and the talkers, holding forth to little clusters of listeners. There were the lovers, meeting as if by chance, exchanging glances across the halls, arranging their assignations in murmured words. There were the thieves, of course, watching the changing rooms with patient, hungry eyes, waiting for a careless moment and an unguarded tunic. The whole range of human character was here, the vain and the kind, the lonely and the sociable, the honest and the sly, all of them soaking together in the hot water at the end of the day. And there were the children, and I want you to see them especially, for they bring a particular life and sweetness to the picture. Children came to the baths with their parents, and splashed and shrieked and played in the shallower pools, and ran laughing along the wet marble until an attendant or a mother called them sharply to order, and made of the solemn adult ritual a great game and a delight, exactly as children make a delight of everything. And there were the old, at the other end of life, the ancient men and women who had come to the baths every day for 70 years and more, who moved slowly now through the heated rooms that had soothed them all their lives, soaking their old aching bones in the warm water, easing the long accumulated weariness of a whole life, finding in the daily ritual the same comfort at the end that they had found in it at the beginning. There is something deeply moving in that, in the thought of a lifetime measured out in evening visits to the baths. From the shrieking child in the shallow pool to the slow old woman easing her aching bones in the same warm water, 70 years on. These halls held all of it, all the ages and conditions of humankind, and gave to each the same simple comfort, the same steaming pools, the same daily soothing of the tired and troubled body. A citizen was bathed here as a laughing child, and courted here as a young lover, and did his business here in the prime of his strength, and eased his old bones here at the last. And the hot pools held him gently through the long arc of it, from the beginning of his life to the end. There are not many things that accompany a person so faithfully, from the cradle nearly to the grave. And the evening bath was one of them, a constant thread running through the whole length of it. And this rich human world, this nightly theatre of comfort and character, was not to be found only in the great capital, but everywhere the Romans went. In every town and city and frontier fort across an empire that spanned much of the known world. Come with me now, and let us rise up in our minds and look out across that whole vast empire at the hour of bathing, and see the same ritual repeating itself at the same hour, in 1,000 places at once, from the cold north to the burning south. It is a lovely thing to behold. Let us rise up now, in our minds, high above the single bathhouse we have wandered all evening, high above the city itself, and look out across the whole enormous expanse of the Roman world at the hour of bathing. Because the thing we have been sharing tonight was not one place, but 10,000 places, the same ritual repeating itself, at the same golden hour, over lands that stretched from the cold and misty north to the deserts of the south, from the western ocean to the far eastern sands. And there is a deep and gentle wonder in that, in the thought of the vast empire settling, all together, into the same hot pools at the end of the day. Look out over it, the immense sweep of it, in the golden light of the same slow evening, in the far cold north, on that misty island, at the edge of everything. The soldiers on their wall are trudging down to their small stone bathhouse to soak the chill of the frontier from their bones. In the great cities of the sunlit south, along the fertile coast of Africa, the people are streaming into bathing palaces as grand as any in the capital, their marble halls glowing in the strong, clear light. In the ancient cities of the East, where Rome had come late to lands already old in civilization, the baths are filling with bathers who speak a dozen tongues. In the towns of Gaul and Spain, in the cities along the great rivers, in the ports and the market towns, and the remote provincial settlements, everywhere, at the same hour, the same thing is happening. The fires burning, the water heating, the crowds gathering. The whole warm ritual of oil and heat and water and rest beginning again, as it began every evening, all across the world. Think of it. At this very hour, in 1,000 towns scattered over 3 continents, people are shedding their clothes in 1,000 changing rooms and oiling their skin and stepping into 1,000 warm rooms and hot rooms and cold pools, and being scraped clean and massaged and perfumed and soothed. The same coloured marble, the same steaming pools, the same curved bronze strigils, the same murmur of water, the same perfumed air, the same slow, contented crowds, repeating and repeating over the face of the known world, so that wherever a Roman travelled, however far from home, he could find the baths and step into them and know at once exactly where he was and exactly what to do and feel in the familiar steam that he was home. The baths were, in a sense, the shared heart of the empire, the one place that was the same everywhere, the common comfort that bound a vast and various world together. And there is something in that universality that reaches toward the deepest meaning of the whole thing. For what travelled outward with Rome was not only the roads and the laws and the legions, not only the hard machinery of empire, but this too, this gentle daily ritual of warm bathing and clean skin and the cared-for body, this idea that ordinary people, wherever they lived, deserved to be clean and soothed at the end of their labours. Wherever the Romans went, they carried the baths, and with them the whole notion that comfort and cleanliness and the gentle care of the body were the birthright of a civilized person, and they built that notion in stone in every town they founded, and taught it to every people they absorbed, so that the warm water spread across the world like a slow, gentle tide, and countless people who had never known such comfort came to know it, and to love it, and to count it among the plain good things of a decent life. It is one of the kindest gifts any empire ever spread, that daily warmth, and it outlasted, in the memory of the body, a great deal of the harder machinery of Roman power. Long after the legions were gone, people remembered the warm water and mourned its loss, and the ruins of the baths stood for centuries as monuments not to conquest, but to ease, to the strange and lovely idea that the point of all that power and engineering and wealth might be, in the end, simply to let ordinary tired people be clean and at ease. Whatever else Rome was, and it was many hard things, it was also this, the empire of hot bathing, the civilization that carried the gentle daily comfort of the bath to the very ends of the earth. But the hour has grown truly late now, all across that wide empire, and here in our own single bathhouse alike, and the fires everywhere are dying, and the crowds everywhere are drifting home, and it is time for us to come back down, gently, to our own warm halls, and to watch them empty and quiet toward the night. Come back down with me, out of the wide sky, and into the lamplit hush, and let us see them as they let go of the day at last. Let us come back down now, out of the wide sky and into our own single bathhouse, and watch it as the evening ends and the halls fall quiet. For this place at the close of the day has a beauty entirely its own, a hushed and melancholy calm quite different from the roaring life of the busy hours. And it is into that gentle quieting that I want to lead you now, because it is the beginning of our own descent towards sleep. The last bathers are drifting homeward. The vendors have packed away their trays and gone. The great social roar has faded to a few low voices, and the endless patient murmur of the water, and into the emptying halls the attendants move quietly, lighting the lamps against the gathering dark. Watch the lamps come to life, one by one, in the deepening dusk. An attendant moves along the walls with a taper, touching the flame to lamp after lamp. And each one blooms into a small globe of light, and slowly the halls fill with a golden glow that gathers in the pools and gleams on the wet marble and throws long shadows up into the vaults. The daylight that fell from the high windows is fading now to a deep evening blue, and against it the lamplight grows richer and warmer, and the vast space, so bright and busy an hour ago, softens into something dim and golden and intimate and calm. The water in the pools lies almost still now, its surface barely trembling, catching and holding the lamplight in long wavering ribbons of gold, and over everything settles the deep quiet of a public place at the end of its day, that particular piece of somewhere that has been full of life and is now emptying gently toward rest. A few last bathers still linger, reluctant to leave, soaking in the quiet as they had soaked in the water, unwilling to break the spell. An old man sits alone at the edge of the pool, his eyes half closed, in no hurry to face the cool walk home. A pair of friends talk low and easy in a corner, their voices hushed in the emptying hall. A young woman, freshly bathed, lingers by a fountain, trailing her fingers in the water, lost in some gentle thought of her own. And the attendants begin, unhurried, the long, slow work of setting the place to rights for the night, gathering forgotten towels, straightening the couches, their footsteps echoing gently in the growing stillness. The place is letting go of the day, just as you are, releasing the crowds and the noise and the business of it all, sinking slowly toward the deep quiet of the night. And the pools murmur on, as they always do, as they will all night long, the one voice that never falls silent, the gentle, endless lullaby of it all. There is a particular magic to the baths at just this hour, half emptied, softly lit, that I want you to feel fully before we go. For it is perhaps the most beautiful moment of the whole long day. The fierce heat has gentled, the crowds have thinned to a scattered few, the lamps burn low and golden in the great dim halls, and their light lies gold on the coloured marble, and the still water, and the gleaming statues, and the vast space, which an hour ago rang with the roar of hundreds, has sunk into a hushed and glowing peace. The steam drifts slow through the lamplight, somewhere a spout still whispers. And a person lingering here now, in the golden hush, feels wrapped in a stillness so complete that they can hardly bear to break it and go out into the ordinary night. This was the reward at the very end of the day, the quiet, glowing peace of the emptying baths. And it is exactly the peace I want to wrap around you now. There is something deeply consoling in a great and busy place gone quiet at the end of its day. All the striving and the noise and the crowded human life of it has drained away, and what remains is only the beautiful glowing space, and the low light, and the murmuring water, and the settled calm. It is the feeling of a day's work honourably done and set aside, of permission, at last, to stop. And it is exactly the feeling I want to leave you with now, as your own day sets itself aside, as your own striving stills, as you sink down at last into the still peace of your own night. The baths are at rest. The great halls are dim and golden and silent. The water murmurs softly in the emptying pools. And it is time, now, for you and for the baths together, to let the whole of it go. Let us find one last quiet corner, you and I, before the night takes us entirely, and sit a moment in the golden lamplight with the water whispering nearby, and think, gently, about what all this care of the body has truly been for. Across all the centuries between those Romans and you, lying cared for in your bed tonight. Come, there is one last thing I want to say to you before you sleep. Let us sit together now, in the quiet golden lamplight of the emptying halls, with the pools murmuring softly nearby, and let me tell you the thing I have been carrying toward all evening, the deepest and gentlest truth beneath this whole long ritual of heat and steam and the care of the skin. Because it would be easy to think of all this, the oiling and the scraping, the milk soaks and the honey masks, the perfumes and the paints, as mere vanity, as the shallow indulgence of a pleasure-loving people. But it was something far deeper than that, and I want you to understand it, because it reaches directly across 2,000 years and touches the very thing you are doing tonight. All of this, every bit of it, was the care of the body, the patient, daily, loving tending of the physical self that carries us through our one brief life. And that tending, when you look at it clearly, is one of the most human and tender acts there is. To wash the tired body warm and clean, to soothe the aching muscles, to soften the weathered skin, to make oneself, at the end of a hard day, comfortable and cared for and well. This is not vanity. It is a kind of love, the love we show ourselves, the daily kindness we pay to the faithful body that asks so much of us and complains so little. The Romans understood this deeply, understood that to tend the body gently was to honor the life it carried, and they built their whole beautiful ritual of the baths around that understanding, and gave it, freely, to nearly everyone. Think of all the weary bodies we have met tonight, moving through these lamplit halls. The labourer, with the dust of the building site on his arms, sinking into the hot water and feeling the ache of the day dissolve. The great lady in her milk, tending her own weariness in her private room. The soldier on the frozen frontier, soaking the cold of the wall out of his bones. The old man easing his ancient joints in the same pool he has known since boyhood. The woman before her mirror, smoothing honey onto her face, grown tired with the years. Every one of them doing the same thing in their own way, according to their own means. Every one of them saying to their own body, with oil and warmth and water, "You have carried me faithfully, and I will tend you now, and you shall be soothed." And the deepest truth of all, the thing I most want you to carry down into sleep, is how little that essential human need has changed across all those centuries. Every one of them wanted exactly what you want tonight. To be soothed, to be clean and comfortable, to have the cares of the day lifted away and the tired body tended and eased, to feel, at the end of it all, cared for. That longing is older than Rome and older than history. And it beats in you tonight exactly as it beat in them, and there is a deep comfort in that, in knowing yourself part of that long, unbroken line of tired human beings seeking, at the end of their days, only to be clean and eased and at peace. So let yourself receive it now, that ancient care, in your own way, in your own bed, 2,000 years and half a world away from those marble halls. You do not need the milk, or the honey, or the oils, or the strigil. You need only to let your body rest, and be warm, and be at ease, to give yourself the same gentle kindness those Romans gave themselves every evening. The simple permission to stop striving and be soothed. Feel the warmth around you, feel the weight of your own tired body sinking into rest. Let the day, with all its cares, drain slowly away, just as it drained away from a Roman sinking into the hot pool at the end of a long day, all those centuries ago. You are part of something very old and very gentle tonight, the long human tradition of ending the day in warmth and kindness. And there is nothing you need to do now but let it hold you, somewhere a spout is still running. The lamps have burned down to their last low gold, and the great halls stand empty and at peace around us, giving back the day's heat to the dark. It is time, now, for us to go. Come, let us step out one final time into the Roman night. And so we come, gently, to the end of our evening, and it is time to leave those halls behind and make our slow way home through the sleeping city, out of the lamplight and the murmuring water, and into the dark peace of the Roman night. Let us step out through the great doors one last time. You and I, the threshold is worn into a shallow dip by all the feet that have crossed it. The evening air comes in to meet us, cooler than we expect after so many hours of steam, and it moves over us like a hand. And somewhere behind us a door closes on all that golden light. The streets are quiet now, and cool, and lit here and there by the glow of a lamp in a window, or the last embers of a street seller's brazier. The great heat of the day is long gone, and the stones give back only a faint remembered warmth now beneath our feet. Above us the sky has gone deep and velvet, and is scattered thick with stars, more than you are used to seeing. For this is a world with no other lights to drown them. And all around us, in the cooling dark, the city is settling towards sleep, the last voices fading behind shuttered windows, the last footsteps echoing away down the quieting streets, the whole enormous restless city breathing slowly now, letting go of another day, and from the baths behind us, growing fainter as we walk, comes still the soft, endless murmur of the water, running on through the night as it will run until the morning, the gentle voice that never falls silent. Feel how your body feels now, at the end of it all, clean and warm and cared for, every muscle eased, every knot of the day worked loose, your skin soft and glowing and lightly scented. Your whole tired self soothed and tended and made new. This is the feeling the Romans chased every single evening and found, and it is the feeling I have wanted to give you all night long, the deep physical contentment of the thoroughly cared for body. The sense of the day's weariness washed and scraped and steamed and soothed entirely away. Let it fill you now, that warm heaviness, that glowing ease, that deep bodily peace. There is nothing left to do tonight. Nothing to tend, nothing to achieve, no more to carry. The day is washed away, the body is soothed, the long evening is done. Let your breathing slow now, and let yourself grow heavy and warm where you are lying, and let the streets and the murmuring baths and the scattered stars and the whole ancient world begin, gently, to fade away. You do not need to hold on to any of it. You do not need to remember a single room or a single name. It is enough that you were here, that you drifted with me for a while through that watery world, that you felt, even for one evening, the deep and ancient pleasure of the well-tended body and the well-soothed heart. Carry only that with you down into sleep, the warmth of it, the softness of it, the gentle knowing that you have been cared for tonight, as the Romans cared for themselves. At the end of their long days, in the murmuring dark, before you drift all the way down, let me say one last gentle word to you, the way I always do. If these slow evenings in faraway places have been a comfort to you, and if you would like to find your way back to them on the nights when sleep is hard to come by, you are always welcome to stay, and to travel with me again whenever you wish. It has been a rare and quiet pleasure to spend these few hours together, drifting through an ancient world while the water murmured around us. I am always so glad of the company, out here in the dark. And now there is nothing left to do but rest. The lamps are low, the water is murmuring softly. The great city sleeps, and the baths sleep, and your body is clean and warm and eased and cared for. And it is time, now, for you to sleep as well. Sleep well, stay warm, be kind to the people in your house, and I will see you in the next one. Good night.